starting the spoilers from the original Spider-Man. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101. That night, Parker hurried to the hospital, accompanied by Gwen. They came to the outside of the ward and saw Harry sitting on the chair and Marco's wife and daughter. "How is he?" Parker looked into the ward and then looked at Harry. The doctor said that fortunately the bullet did not hit the vital point and he is out of danger, but he is still in a coma. "Flint, Marco, do you want your superpowers back?" The narrator's voice sounded in Marco's mind, and the strange thing was that no one else heard it this time. Marco, who was still in a coma, seemed to hear the voice of the narrator, asking himself questions, but he felt like he was dreaming. "Today someone attacked Gwen, and then someone attacked you," Parker said. Harry was shocked when he heard this. Someone actually wanted to kill Gwen and himself at the same time. Who would have such a great hatred for them? Gwen recalled what happened not long ago and said in a state of shock, "Fortunately, Venom saved me. My father and others are investigating this matter. I will tell you when there is news." Harry nodded, and Mary Jane also came at this time. She was stuck in traffic for a long time on the road, so she was late. Parker greeted her, and Gwen smiled at her. Mary Jane looked at the two people who matched well, and her heart was inevitably a little sour. But she didn't show it on her face. She smiled at the two, and sat next to Harry. At this time, Parker's mobile phone rang. He picked it up and listened. The person on the other side was the police station. They found the person who met the identity through the surveillance cameras near the two people when they were attacked. When Parker, Harry and others learned that it was Eddie, everyone present was a little shocked because they had never seen Eddie in reality. They didn't understand why Eddie would do such a thing. At this time, George from the police station personally took the phone. George Stacy told Parker and the others about Eddie's recent experience. Only then did they know that Eddie had been cyberbullied and searched. George inferred that Eddie hated them because of Shy and Moo, so he wanted to retaliate against them and asked them to be more careful. He had also sent more police to protect Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Parker and Gwen left the hospital. He sent Gwen home. Just as he was about to leave, Venom suddenly jumped from Gwen to Parker, attached to his body, and turned his red and blue uniform black. Parker felt Venom's thoughts, and found that it was saying that its mission had been completed, and now it was going back to Parker. At this time, Parker suddenly realized that Venom was not without reason to stay on Gwen. He looked up at the dark Shy and Moo and said, "Thank you." Then he planned to find Eddie. Since he wanted to harm his family and friends, Parker naturally couldn't sit idly by. Eddie hid in a dark, damp alley filled with a bad smell, and his body limply leaned against the wall. His eyes were empty. He held the pistol tightly in his hand, but a bitter smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He clearly understood that the police would soon find him according to the clues. His identity would be exposed, and he would be hunted down, and all this was his inescapable fate. But he didn't care, or even didn't care at all. After all, since Sky Curtain exposed his actions, he had already lost the courage and willingness to live. Now he has become a street rat. People know him everywhere. Even those fierce and brutal gang members avoid him and don't want to have anything to do with him. And all this is just because of Sky Curtain, because of the existence of Peter Parker, and because of him. His parents have also suffered from the cold violence of society and endured tremendous pressure and pain. Once his attempt to shoot Gwen and Harry is made public, his situation will become more difficult, and his parents will face more cruel treatment. He can't implicate his parents, although they no longer recognize him. He originally just wanted to let Peter Parker taste the pain of losing his loved ones in the sky at the last moment of his life, but now it seems that even such a small wish cannot be realized. He didn't understand why Flynn Marco, who killed people, could be forgiven by people, but he couldn't. "Why do they do this to me?" he murmured to himself. "I just did what everyone would do, and made the mistakes that everyone would make." He was very confused and puzzled, and his heart was full of resentment and dissatisfaction. Eddie would never understand the reason. At this moment, he only felt that his world had collapsed, the future was dark, and there was no hope. Lord, if you really exist, please hurry up, let all these nightmares end. Eddie slowly drew a cross on his chest with his hands and picked up the pistol. He was pale, his eyes were empty, and he slowly put the pistol into his mouth. His hands kept shaking. He tried to pull the trigger, but his fingers lost control. He took a deep breath, took the pistol out of his mouth, put it on his forehead. Sweat dripped from his forehead, and tried to pull the trigger again, but the fear in his heart made him unable to do it. After a while, Eddie still couldn't pull the trigger. He threw the pistol on the ground, held his head with both hands, and cried painfully. While Eddie was still struggling with his inner fear, Parker was looking for his traces everywhere according to the approximate range provided by the police. Parker knew Eddie's situation very well. In this environment, everyone recognizes him and no one is willing to receive him, so the only place he can hide must be a bridge hole, sewer or some hidden alley. He has searched the bridge hole and found no trace of Eddie. The sewer is too complicated, and he doesn't know where to start, so he starts from the ground. Fortunately, Eddie didn't walk far on his legs. Parker soon found him in a small alley and climbed down quietly from his head. At this time, a flash of lightning flashed, and Eddie, who was looking down, suddenly found a figure on his head, and Parker also knew that he was discovered. Looking at Spider-Man who fell to the ground, Eddie stood up suddenly and picked up the gun on the ground and pointed it at Parker. Peter Parker, come and kill me. If you don't kill me, I will kill you, he yelled, but Parker did not move, just looked at him quietly. After a long time, he said, Eddie, give up, you know that it's useless to me, come back with me and surrender. Eddie laughed sarcastically, then yelled at him, surrender? I have no hope, you have ruined everything for me. After venting his inner emotions, he calmed down a little and suddenly laughed again. Peter Parker, luckily you came and gave me a good idea. He put down his raised hand, wiped the pistol with his clothes, and then picked it up with his sleeves. Then Eddie fired 2 shots at the left and right walls. Bang bang. Parker looked at Eddie's actions with some confusion, not understanding what he meant, until he saw Eddie pointing the pistol at himself. He reacted and fired Spider Silk. Chapter 102. Bang. Eddie Brock fell down slowly, blood slowly flowing out of the bullet hole on his forehead. The next second after the bullet was fired, Parker's Spider Silk pulled the pistol away and fell to the ground. Several consecutive gunshots resounded through the night sky, waking up countless people who were sleeping. Eddie. Parker yelled. This was the last method Eddie thought of. Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well disgust Peter Parker one last time and frame him for killing himself with his own death. There was no need to confirm it. As long as there were doubts, there would naturally be people who hated Peter Parker to magnify this matter. When the police car arrived, Eddie had been dead for a long time. Parker, wearing a spider suit, stood there, quietly looking at his body. He also figured out Eddie's intention of doing this. He smiled bitterly, not understanding why Eddie hated him so much, and he framed him for suicide. Even if it was destined to fail, it would make Parker feel very uncomfortable. When he went back to the police station with the police to take a statement, Gwen hurried to the police station. Seeing that she was very worried, Parker comforted her that he would be fine. Then Harry, Mary Jane, Uncle Ben and Aunt May also came. They had already learned about Eddie's death. Harry did not believe that Parker would kill Eddie. In fact, the police did not believe it either, but due to the process, some things had to be done. So Parker stayed in the police station and began to recount what happened. The news that Eddie died of gunshot and Spider-Man was suspected of being a suspect quickly made the front page headlines, and the second news was that Eddie Brock failed to shoot Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn. The broadcast of the too heavy news made the citizens in an uproar. Most people thought that Spider-Man was a very kind and good person, and he would never kill anyone. But there were also a few people who had a guilty conscience and thought that it must have been Peter Parker who did it, because they judged others by themselves, and felt that Peter Parker was also a human being, and it was inevitable that he would fail. It's just that these words dare not be said publicly, but only circulated secretly, and this is also Eddie's purpose. As long as there is a stain, Peter Parker can't be a saint. What's more, Parker also has venom. Even if Cheyenne Moose said that it would no longer affect people's personality, who knows whether it is true or not? Even if Cheyenne lied, no one can tell. Hello everyone. We have seen the story of the first generation of Peter Parker before. Now let's see the story of the second generation of Spider-Man. The voice of the narrator sounded, and once again attracted countless people to watch. After a few months, Cheyenne appeared again. This time the silence was longer than before. Tony Stark thought that Cheyenne had stopped playing videos. Fortunately, it started playing videos again a few months later. I haven't heard this voice for several months. I miss it. Tony said while studying the more advanced Mark 7. This time his goal is to be able to fly directly to where him. In this way, he doesn't need to make a workbench specially. Although he tried it before, the effect was not good. After several months of research, it has obviously made greater progress now. Some people often say that the first generation Spider Spirit, the second generation Spider-Man, the third generation Father Spider Spirit. Toby Spider raised his eyebrows. He actually said that to him. Although he also felt that he was outrageous, he could recover quickly, no matter what injuries he suffered. Spider Spirit. Ha ha ha. Gwen looked at Parker, who was teased by the narration of the sky curtain, and couldn't help laughing. The venom on her clothes also began to sway with the turbulent waves on her chest. Hey. Parker turned his head and looked at Gwen helplessly and suddenly felt very tired. Okay. I won't laugh anymore. I won't laugh anymore. Gwen shook her hands and bent down to say, what about the third generation father? How can you say half of it? Tony put down the tools in his hand, frowned and looked at the sky curtain, and complained very dissatisfiedly. Could it be the third generation Father Spider-Man? Rod said with a brainwave. Tony Stark, don't ask so many questions, you'll know what I mean later. The narrator didn't care about Tony's complaints. Tony Stark again. Who is he? Why does Cheyenne always reply to him? But ignore me? A man whose country on the world map is larger than Africa is very angry. He is the savior. Who are you? You want Cheyenne to reply to you? Are you worthy? An old man on the side looked at him with disdain. His contemptuous eyes hurt his fragile heart, and he immediately fought with the other party. As a result, he was knocked down in a few moves, and was carried to the ambulance. P.S. From here on, the first generation is called Toby Spider, and the second generation is Peter Parker. Compared to the first generation Spider Spirit, the power of the second generation Spider-Man is relatively weak. Both physical fitness and recovery ability are slightly inferior. The head of Garfield Spider appeared on the sky screen. But the second generation Spider-Man is not useless. His proud spider sense and superior fighting skills are enough to make up for most of the shortcomings. As the voice of the sky screen narration fell, the originally dark sky screen began to play. Harry Osborn looked at Peter Parker on the sky screen and felt that he was very familiar. After thinking carefully, he suddenly laughed and said, Peter, you actually became Spider-Man. When I go back, you must treat me to a big meal to celebrate. When Harry learned that his old friend was Spider-Man, he wanted to go back to New York to find Peter Parker, but Norman Osborn disagreed. He was afraid that Peter Parker, this big vortex, would kill his son like the first generation Harry. He wanted to wait and see if Peter Parker would let Harry die because of him. Norman only hoped that he could hold on until then. I saw a little boy sitting on the stairs, covering his eyes and counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Whether you are hidden or not, I'm coming to find you. Then he walked down the stairs and began to search. The young Peter Parker first came to the living room, but there was no one inside, and the TV was still playing. He saw the shoes behind the curtain and thought he had found them. He walked to the front quietly and pulled them open, but unfortunately there was a broom behind it with a hat on it. Little Peter Parker searched around the house. He opened a door again, but unfortunately he still couldn't find it. He came to the cabinet in the corridor. There were photos of their family and a pair of glasses on it. He put on the glasses and looked around as if he was his father. After putting down the glasses, he came to his father's study and saw that the table was in a mess. The chair fell to the ground beside him, and the documents on the table were scattered on the ground. He came behind the table. The window next to it was swaying in the wind, and the glass on the window was broken. Dad, As he shouted, his father Richard Parker ran over. When he saw the appearance of the house, he immediately had an ominous premonition. He picked up little Peter Parker and put him aside, drew the curtains, picked up the drawer on the ground, and checked it a little to find that the things inside had not been taken away. He picked up a pen and turned on the switch of the drawer, and immediately the inner layer was exposed. There was a document inside. He looked through it for a few times to make sure it was not lost and felt relieved. His wife Mary Parker picked up little Peter Parker beside him, looked at him nervously, and then carried Parker out of the room. Richard Parker erased most of the information on the blackboard and threw the eraser aside. The camera came to the other side, and a spider could be clearly seen in the container. In the dark night, it was pouring rain. A car stopped at the door. The couple held little Peter Parker and knocked on the door of Ben Parker and Aunt May. Chapter 103. Toby Spider looked at this scene and felt familiar. Did his parents also leave him like this? Who was the person who looked for the information? Did they kill his parents? He couldn't help but go back to Uncle Ben's house to ask them about this matter. Uncle Ben only knew that his brother died in a plane crash. The couple didn't know much else. Toby Spider didn't know who to ask. He could only patiently continue to watch the sky curtain, hoping to get an answer. Garfield Spider was even more shocked. He had forgotten what happened when he was a child, but the video of the sky curtain reminded him of it. The sky curtain has appeared for a long time, and he has been paying attention to it. In fact, he has always envied the Peter Parker in the sky curtain. He has such a strong power, unlike him, who has been bullied at school. There are also Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy in their school, although they look different. He always thought it was just a coincidence, although many people use this to mock him for not being worthy of the same name as Spider-Man. And all this ended when he found the interlayer in his father's briefcase the day before yesterday. After learning a lot of things from the file, he went to Osman Industries the next day, stole an intern's ID, cracked the access control of the biological research laboratory, and touched the instrument. As a result, he was bitten by a spider inside and caused some trouble in the subway. After returning home, Peter Parker felt that something was wrong with his body. He was very hungry. After catching a fly, he couldn't help but want to eat it. Fortunately, Aunt May interrupted him. He could only take food from the refrigerator and ate a lot of food before he felt relieved. Then he found a spider hanging behind his neck, although he immediately thought of Spider-Man Peter Parker in the sky. But boundless sleepiness came. He didn't even know when he slept in the bed, and he broke things at home the next morning, and then the sky began to play. Ben Parker and Aunt May were sitting on a chair and talking with their couple. Peter Parker was hiding outside and watching. Aunt May saw Parker peeking and smiled at him. "You have to live with Aunt May and Uncle Ben for a while." Richard Parker squatted in front of little Peter and said to him, "I want to go with you." Little Peter didn't want to leave his parents. No. Richard Parker knew that they would be in danger next, so he had to put his son in a safe place. Only in this way could they escape with peace of mind. He touched little Peter's head and kissed him on the forehead. He doesn't like the crust on the sandwich and likes to turn on a small light when he sleeps. Mary Parker stroked little Peter Parker while choking and telling Aunt May what they should pay attention to. Richard Parker knew that they couldn't stay here for a long time, so he pulled Mary Parker and said, "Mary, it's time to go. Let's go." Mary Parker left here sadly, and little Peter Parker couldn't help but follow him and held Richard Parker's hand. "Dad," Richard Parker just said to him, "be a good boy." Then he closed the door and left in the heavy rain. He was left looking at his parents' backs, and Aunt May squatted beside him and comforted him. So Peter Parker's parents just disappeared forever? Jarvis, search for the target. Tony saw that Peter Parker's family had a lot of research on spiders, and he realized that it might not be a coincidence that Peter Parker could become Spider-Man. He frowned. The sky screen did not play these details in the original Toby Spider's life. This made him think that Peter Parker's parents just encountered an accident, but now it seems that this matter is not simple. "Sir, no matching target was found," Jarvis replied to Tony after searching. "Okay. It seems to be another parallel universe story. I thought the second generation meant to take over Peter Parker's class. It turned out to be another Peter Parker, but why is it called the second generation?" Tony didn't know the time of Spider-Man, so he was very confused. What did the sky screen define the first, second, and third generations? He looked up at the sky screen, hoping that the narrator could explain it to him, but the sky screen did not answer his meaning. Uncle Ben smiled at Parker and said, "Could the third generation be your son?" What? Parker was confused. How did Uncle Ben think of this? He doesn't even have a girlfriend now. In a blink of an eye, Peter Parker has grown up. He hung a photo on the school notice board with a label underneath that reads, "Black Panther Debate Club." At this time, a basketball hit him, and Peter Parker didn't react, and was hit directly. The school bully Flesh beside him laughed very happily. Then he gestured to Parker, and said with a smile, "Sorry." Anyone with a discerning eye could see that he did it on purpose, but Peter Parker didn't mind. He smiled and greeted him, "Good morning, Flesh." Flesh walked past Parker with his little brother. "Good morning, Parker." After walking past, he suddenly took a step back to Parker. Parker was startled by his behavior and couldn't help but take a step back, then waved his hand and looked at Flesh, who had successfully pulled the prank. The prank was over. He was walking in the corridor with a skateboard, and then a girl called him. "Hey, hello. Is your name Peter?" Parker nodded and looked at her with some confusion. "I like the photos you took." She smiled. "Oh, thanks." "Thank you." Parker was a little flattered when he heard this, and subconsciously turned his head away and dared not look at her directly. "Listen, are you free on Friday night?" the female classmate asked. Parker mistakenly thought that she wanted to date him and shook his head hesitantly to indicate that it was okay. "Great. Can you take some photos of my boyfriend's car? I want to choose a beautiful photo to frame as his birthday gift." After hearing this, Parker realized that he had misunderstood and smiled awkwardly. "You are so nice. This is a good idea. Okay, I have to check my time." Although she already has a boyfriend, Parker is still happy that she recognizes his photography skills. It's just that the misunderstanding made him very embarrassed, and he couldn't wait to escape from here. He skated on the skateboard in the corridor for a while, and then he saw the teacher coming out. Parker. He immediately picked up the skateboard when he saw the teacher. "Teacher, what's the matter? Do you still want the skateboard?" The teacher stared at him and asked. "Yes." Parker answered very sincerely, fearing that the teacher would take away his skateboard. "Then don't put it on the ground. The wheels are facing up," the teacher shouted at Parker. "Okay, like this?" Parker raised the skateboard above his head and walked further and further away. The teacher thought that a warning was enough, so he turned around and walked back to the classroom, but Parker turned a corner and started skating again. Chapter 104. Rebellious Teenagers. Huh. Just like you back then, except you don't know how to skateboard. The first generation of Uncle Ben smiled, and the Toby spider in the sky at the beginning was the same. Both of them were not very obedient. Toby Spider touched his nose awkwardly, while Harry, who was still in the company, recalled the days when he was still in school. Parker came to his locker, and a man and a woman were kissing passionately, as if no one was around. Parker sighed when he saw this. He struggled to open his locker, because the man and a woman were kissing passionately, and didn't care that they were pressing down on Parker's locker. Parker took out the book from a gap with difficulty, and as soon as he let go, the locker door was pressed down by them again. Who are they? How dare they? Find them out. I'm going to criticize them. The director was furious. They were kissing passionately in broad daylight. Where is the reputation of their school? Are they here to study or to fall in love? The first feeling of the two parties was very exciting. Their affectionate appearance was actually seen by the whole world. Doesn't this mean that everyone knows about their intimacy? Then she remembered that this was at school. The girl was a little panicked immediately. She didn't know if her parents would kick her out of the house. The boy also panicked. Isn't this a slap in the face of the school? Will the school let him go? Sure enough, not long after, his teacher found him and took him to the office, and then there was a sound of chaos inside. There were many students watching the excitement outside, and then two students who liked to watch the excitement were caught because they stretched their necks too long. But Parker knew nothing about this because he was facing the death stare of Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Under the gaze of the two, Peter Parker told everything like pouring beans. After listening, Uncle Ben couldn't help but sigh. I hope you can remember the lesson of another Peter Parker. But Aunt May was more worried about Uncle Ben himself, because the Toby spider in the sky killed her Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben knew what Aunt May was thinking, but he didn't know if he would get into trouble, so he just patted her hand and said nothing. After class, Parker walked out of the teaching building with a camera in his hand. As soon as he walked out, he saw Gwen Stacy sitting on a chair reading a book. He couldn't help but secretly took a photo for her. At this time, a shout came from the side. "Eat it! Eat it!" Parker turned his head and saw a group of people gathered together. It turned out that the school bully Flesh was bullying a student, and other students on the side were constantly making trouble. He held Gordon upside down and shouted, "Eat the vegetables! Gordon! Hurry up!" Gordon held his body tightly and refused to obey Flesh. Parker squeezed in curiously. After seeing Parker, Flesh shouted at him, "Hey, Parker, come here. Take a picture. Quick." Flesh grabbed Gordon's thin body, wanting to leave a souvenir so that he could laugh at him later. Parker certainly refused to agree to such an unreasonable request. "No, I won't take pictures of this kind of thing. Put him down." Flesh kept urging Parker to help him take pictures, and Parker kept persuading him to put Gordon down. He also said to Gordon, "Gordon, don't eat." Parker's refusal made Flesh a little annoyed, but he still endured it. He looked at Parker with a bad look and urged, "Take a picture." "Parker, put him down." "Flesh." Parker kept persuading, but Flesh still didn't give up and urged again, "Take a picture. Put him down." "Eugene." Parker shouted at him. Seeing this, Flesh threw Gordon aside and walked towards Parker angrily. Parker wanted to go over to see Gordon, but he was grabbed by the collar. Then he punched Parker in the face with a heavy punch, and Parker was knocked to the ground immediately. "Come on. Get up. Parker." Flesh yelled at Parker, and when Parker stood up, he kneed him again. Parker fell to the ground holding his stomach, and the severe pain made him roll over unconsciously. Flesh was still yelling at Parker, "Get up. Hurry up." The crowd watching on the side also followed suit and shouted, "Get up. Get up. Get up." Without waiting for Parker to get up again, Flesh kicked him to the ground again. Mary Jane, who was wearing purple clothes and glasses, looked at Peter Parker with some heartache. Parker covered his stomach and looked up shy and lay on the ground, still refusing Flesh's unreasonable request. "I still can't take pictures. Just lie there. Parker. Who else wants to try?" Flesh knocked Parker down, feeling very powerful, and challenged the onlookers. "Who else?" At this time, Gwen squeezed in from the outside of the crowd and came behind him. Fresh. Fresh heard someone calling his name. He immediately roared and turned around, but saw that it was Gwen, and the fire in his heart was immediately extinguished. "Fresh, will we meet after school today? Come to my house at 3:30? I hope you have finished your homework. Last time you made me very disappointed." Facing Gwen, Flesh didn't dare to speak loudly to her because he still had to rely on Gwen to help him with tutoring. "Okay, get out of the way." Even so, Flesh still didn't want to lose face because of Gwen, because there were so many people watching. But Gwen said firmly, "No, let's go to class first, okay? How about it?" Just at this time, the class bell rang, and Flesh took the opportunity to go down, said, "Whatever," and walked away. He didn't want to make things too awkward with Gwen, because if he didn't pass the next exam, he would be kicked out of the football team, and he needed Gwen to help him with tutoring. Gwen followed him and couldn't help but turn her head to look at Parker, who then climbed up with difficulty. Everyone dispersed when they saw that there was no fun to watch. Before leaving, one of Flesh's brothers kicked Parker's camera, looked at him with disdain and left. Parker was left sitting alone on the ground. He first checked his camera and was relieved when he saw that there was no big problem. Peter Parker is really kind, easy to bully, but never willing to bow down to school bullies. Maybe that's why you can become Spider-Man. The first generation Uncle Ben sighed. Even though he was very weak, Peter Parker never succumbed to evil forces. This shows that the teaching of another self to Parker was very effective. Harry narrowed his eyes and looked at the bullied Parker. Recalling that the first generation Harry had always protected Toby Spider, he couldn't help but sigh. If he was there, how could Parker be bullied? George Stacy saw that his daughter was actually associating with such a person and immediately called his wife Helen Stacy. Tell Gwen not to have any contact with such scum in the future. Call Eugene Flesh Thompson to me. And the roar came from the office again. Just now, he was severely scolded by the principal because of the passionate kiss between the students. Turning around, he found that Flesh was bullying his classmates unscrupulously. Seeing this scene, the dean's blood pressure instantly soared, and he almost died of anger. Chapter 105. Parker came to the classroom and sat behind Gwen on the left. Gwen turned her head and looked at Parker. I think you did a great job just now. She smiled at Parker and added, a little silly, but great. Parker felt that he had lost face in front of his dream lover and was a little afraid to face her. Just looking forward. You'd better go to the infirmary. You may have a concussion. Gwen reminded Parker to see a doctor. Hearing her words, Parker looked at her in surprise, and Gwen also smiled sweetly at him. What's your name? Gwen suddenly asked. Peter Parker had been like a little transparent for so long, and she couldn't remember his name. Parker was a little stunned when he heard this. Don't you know my name? No, I know your name. I want to know if you still know it. Gwen realized that she had said the wrong thing and immediately made up for it and rounded it back. Parker stared into her eyes. Peter Parker. Peter Parker. Gwen winked at him and Parker said his name. Good. Gwen nodded and turned to look at the podium. Parker was a little happy to talk to Gwen and he seemed to have a good impression of him. His eyes couldn't help but always slant on her. If I were to go to the infirmary. Gwen took a pen and suddenly turned back to Parker and emphasized that she didn't want Parker to get hurt. Your name is Gwen? Really? Parker looked at Gwen. This was the first goddess he had ever been so close to. Gwen Stacy. Gwen smiled and introduced her name. Okay. Parker nodded involuntarily, although he had known her name for a long time. A very good girl, beautiful and kind. She can help her classmates with their homework, which means she has good grades and high IQ. And she has high EQ too. She can make up for her mistakes immediately, so as not to make the scene too ugly. The onlookers looked at Gwen with great satisfaction. Compared with Toby Spider's Gwen Stacy, Garfield Spider's Gwen Stacy is not inferior at all, and even more outstanding, because of more details. She is a good girl, Peter. You have to protect her well. Don't let her get hurt. Uncle Ben clearly remembers what the Sky Curtain said at the beginning. Is it the first generation Spider-Man watching his best brother die in front of him? Is it the second generation Spider-Man watching his beloved girlfriend die in his arms? If their Peter Parker is the second generation, then he will face the pain of his girlfriend dying in front of him. Uncle Ben doesn't know whether Toby Spider's universe has resolved the crisis of Harry's death, but he hopes that Garfield Spider can avoid this regret. Cheyenne Moo also said that Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy were either destined to be together or separated by yin and yang. Toby Spider and his Gwen were not destined to be together. Then the next yin and yang separation must be referring to the second generation Spider-Man Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy here. Peter Parker has a high IQ, so he naturally thought of this, and he nodded silently to Uncle Ben. Harry thought silently, Peter, when I go back, I will never let you get hurt. Peter Parker. George Stacy muttered the name with a complicated expression. He also thought of this, and in fact, most people thought of it. What should I do? He muttered to himself. For a moment, he didn't know if he should stop them if they were together. Captain, I think they look very compatible, don't they? His subordinate heard what he said and said. George Stacy glared at him, drove him out of his office, and then pondered alone. Parker returned home and greeted Aunt May, who was cooking. Aunt May said without raising her head, I'm going to make spaghetti and meatballs tonight. Hearing this, Parker said in disbelief, no way. Spaghetti and meatballs? Aunt May heard his words and was very puzzled by Peter Parker's sudden picky eating. Since when did you start not liking spaghetti and meatballs? What she didn't know was that Gordon had spaghetti and meatballs for lunch. When Parker heard this dish, he would think of his embarrassment in front of the goddess, so he seemed a little resistant. Parker took a bottle of water from the refrigerator. Aunt May, who was still preparing to cook, suddenly discovered the wound on Parker's face. OMG. Hearing her exclamation, Parker didn't know that the wound on his face, the injury, was seen by her. What's wrong? What's wrong with your face? She looked at Parker with great concern, afraid that he would fight with someone. Parker didn't want her to know that he was beaten, so he lied. I'm fine. I fell while skateboarding. It's okay. At this time, Uncle Ben brought a dirty cardboard box, and Aunt May stopped him immediately after seeing it. Ben Parker, don't think of putting your dirty box in my kitchen. She looked at the cardboard box with disgust. These are the trophies I won from bowling, Uncle Ben explained. After hearing that the trophies in it were Uncle Ben's trophies, Aunt May no longer insisted. In that case, please put the dirty box in my kitchen. Although she agreed, she still disliked the box because it was too dirty. After Uncle Ben put down the box, he also saw the wound on Parker's face and looked at him in confusion. What happened to you? He fell down. Why are you kids playing with those things? Aunt May said. She did not doubt Parker's words. But Parker could not hide from Uncle Ben, who was also young. He saw through Parker's clumsy lies at a glance, but did not expose him directly, because it is both stupid and dangerous. Remember those stupid things we did? He looked at Aunt May with a smile. I don't remember. Aunt May rolled her eyes at him. The child is still here. What nonsense is there? Believe me, we were like this when we were young, Uncle Ben said to Parker earnestly. Okay. Thank you for telling me. Aunt May complained that Uncle Ben still had to bring up those old things. Uncle Ben bent down and picked up the box again. He could see that Aunt May didn't want such a dirty box in the kitchen. Parker saw Uncle Ben's bare feet with many water stains on them and couldn't help asking, hey, where is the flood? Come with me. I'll take you to see, Uncle Ben said without turning his head. Really? Yes. Okay. Parker followed him, leaving Aunt May to continue cooking. Chapter 106. Parker followed Uncle Ben to the attic. Uncle Ben thought there might be something wrong with the condenser plate, but Parker didn't think so. No, the condenser plate and the heat pipe won't produce so much water. It must be a problem with the delivery pipe. After listening to him, Uncle Ben thought it made sense and agreed. This is the only reasonable explanation. Then he asked, can you fix it? Parker shook his head. No, at least not tonight. I'll go to the hardware store tomorrow. Okay. Apply this to your face. Uncle Ben tore open the bag and threw a piece of ointment to Parker. Parker caught it with some surprise, took a look at it, and put it on the wound. How is the other one? Hearing this, Parker was a little surprised that Uncle Ben knew he was lying. Come on. I know what's going on at a glance. Do you want me to call his father? Uncle Ben said while packing up. Parker immediately rejected Uncle Ben's kindness. No, no. Okay. I won't tell Aunt May. Those little devils who pissed her off are so pitiful. Uncle Ben left with the box and told Parker, before going upstairs, see if there's anything worth keeping. Okay. Parker immediately agreed. While carrying the sundries, Parker accidentally found a briefcase. Looking at the letters on the bag, he suddenly recalled what happened the night before his parents left. At that time, Richard Parker opened the briefcase in the car and took out a document from it. He was still very young when he saw this scene. Plumbers are not responsible for repairing electrical appliances. Parker went upstairs with a briefcase in his hand. At this time, Uncle Ben was arguing with Aunt May. No, they can fix it too. Aunt May thought they could fix it. They are only responsible for repairing pipes and pumping water. Uncle Ben firmly believed that plumbers only repair water pipes. If you ask them to go. Aunt May saw Parker holding the briefcase before she finished her words. Uncle Ben also saw it, and the two of them fell silent for a moment. The two looked at each other silently, with an inexplicably worried look on their faces. Uncle Ben smiled and said, I forgot all about that thing. It belonged to your father. Parker nodded. Yeah. His eyes became red for some reason. He asked us to keep it for him. Uncle Ben smiled a little embarrassedly and put the plate in his hand on the table. He saw this in the window of a leather goods store on 9th Avenue. He was only 19 years old at that time. Uncle Ben recalled Richard Parker at that time and couldn't help but smile. He sat down and told Parker about what happened back then. What does a 19-year-old kid need a briefcase for? Guess who sold it to him? Uncle Ben kept it a secret. I don't know. Parker shook his head. Your mother. That's how they met. Aunt May also remembered what happened back then and couldn't help but smile, but her eyes turned red as she smiled. Parker looked at Uncle Ben in surprise and asked in confusion, he asked you to keep it well, why? There's nothing in it. Have you seen it? There's nothing in it. Hearing Parker say this, Aunt May explained, your father is a very mysterious person, Peter. Yes, I know. Parker's eyes were red. He took out a photo from his briefcase and handed it to Uncle Ben. Who is this? Do you know who this is? Uncle Ben took a look and guessed. A colleague who worked with your father, I guessed. Aunt May saw that the atmosphere was a little sad and hurriedly interrupted them and said, take it off the table, okay? We are going to eat. Move it away. Go wash your hands. Hurry up. Okay. Parker could only listen to Aunt May and put the briefcase in the room. Uncle Ben turned around and looked at Aunt May in the kitchen. She didn't dare to show it in front of Parker just now. Now she couldn't help but cover her mouth and cried sadly. Peter Parker. Rajat Ratta looked at Parker's face in the sky and remembered that he had seen him in the company yesterday and bumped into him. He couldn't help but frowned, thinking of the spider falling in the biological silk laboratory yesterday. When he knew it, he thought that the researchers accidentally messed up the silk thread. Now it seems that Spider-Man should have done it, but Rajat Ratta couldn't figure out how Peter Parker entered the laboratory, and why did he know the password? Rajat Ratta knew very well that Richard Parker and Mary Howard Parker die. They did die in a plane accident, but this accident was not an ordinary accident. He was not a fool. He had thought about killing Peter Parker directly, but he guessed that Peter Parker might have become Spider-Man at this time, and Skydo might not let him succeed. After dinner, Parker returned to his room and carefully checked the contents of his briefcase. He took out a pair of glasses from his glasses case, thought about it, took off the contact lenses in his pupils, and put on his father's glasses. Then he picked up Richard Parker's work card, which clearly said O-Style Industries. Looking at this work card, he seemed to have returned to that night. You have to be a good boy, Peter. Richard Parker squatted in front of little Peter Parker. Where are you going? Some things need your mother and me to deal with together. Parker's memories ended, and he continued to check the briefcase. He checked it over and over again, and felt that the thickness was not right. He touched the back with his hand, and he found a hidden compartment with many documents inside. Parker picked up the document, and he didn't know what he thought of. He quickly got up and closed the door and locked it from the inside with a remote control so that even if someone outside had a room key, they couldn't open it. That's... Connors widened his eyes. Could this be the 00 decay rate algorithm he had been looking for? Legitrata was also very surprised. They didn't find Richard Parker's decay rate algorithm anyway. It turned out that it was hidden in Ben Parker's home, and he didn't take it away at all. No wonder they have been getting nothing for so many years, and after losing Richard Parker, their research has stagnated for many years. Connors has not found the correct decay rate algorithm so far. Norman Osborn is almost unable to hold on, but it appears at this time. The only regret is that it is in Spider-Man's hands. Want to snatch something from Spider-Man? I'm afraid it's a bit difficult. I can only think of other ways. Chapter 107. He picked up the document and looked at the information on it. There was also a photo of Dr. Connors and Richard Parker next to it. Parker didn't understand the meaning of the formulas on it. One of the circled formulas caught his attention. 00 decay rate algorithm? He read out the name on the line of formulas, and then a knock on the door interrupted him. Wait a minute. Parker quickly put the document aside, swept the items on the ground aside, then got up and sat on the chair and pressed the remote control switch. Come in. Uncle Ben opened the door with his voice and asked worriedly, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Parker raised his head and replied with glasses. OMG. You look exactly like him. Can I come in? Uncle Ben was amazed that Parker and his father seemed to be grown from the same mold. After Parker nodded, Uncle Ben walked in, picked up the intact Rubik's Cube on the table, and played with it, talking as he walked. Listen, I don't have much education, you know that, Peter. When you were 10, I couldn't help you with your homework. Uncle Ben sat on the bed, lowered his head, and fiddled with the Rubik's Cube, and continued, "What I want to say is that I know your father is not around. It must be very sad for you, and we don't talk about them often." "Well, it's okay." Parker shrugged, pretending that nothing happened. He didn't want Uncle Ben to know his inner feelings. "No. Of course it matters. I wish I could change this situation, but I can't." Uncle Ben felt that it was unfair to Peter that they avoided talking about Richard Parker. So he decided to tell Parker something. "Kurt Connors. This is the name of the man with your father in the photo. They worked together for many years and had a very good relationship. We never saw him again until that night. He never called, not once. Think about it." Then Uncle Ben looked up and saw Parker's computer desktop and suddenly said, "She is beautiful." Parker turned his head away a little embarrassedly, and Gwen's sweet smile on the computer was very eye-catching. Before Uncle Ben left, Parker called him, "Uncle Ben. What's the matter?" Uncle Ben turned his head and looked at Parker. "You are a great father, you know." Parker looked at him very seriously and said. Hearing Parker's words, Uncle Ben smiled with relief, and he finally heard this sentence from Parker. "Gwen, it seems that this Peter Parker has always been secretly in love with you." Mrs. Stacy looked at her with a smile. Gwen blushed and said quickly, "Mom, what are you talking about? That's the debate club photo, not just me." "Aha, is that so? What about the photo on the wall?" She was no stranger to her daughter's reaction. She was like this when her parents found out she was in love with George. George Stacy sighed, not knowing what to say. He wanted to persuade his daughter to stay away from Peter Parker, but he didn't know how to start. Parker covered his face. Now that his secret crush on Gwen was exposed, he suddenly didn't know how to face Gwen. Go after her bravely, if you like her. "Peter, remember, you are destined to do great things." "I always think so." Uncle Ben knew what Parker was thinking. After all, he had also experienced this stage, so he encouraged Parker to find Gwen. Parker began to search for Richard Parker and Kurt Connors on the internet. One of the URLs had a photo of the two of them, and the title on it read "Interspecies Genetics, Science Fiction or Scientific Fact." He also found photos of the accident scene after the accident of Richard Parker and his wife. He searched for information about Dr. Kurt Connors again, and saw an article he published, which clearly stated, "Imagine a world without weaknesses. Imagine that everyone is equal." He checked Dr. Connors' personal profile, which introduced Dr. Connors' latest scientific progress and detailed his work location and work unit. Peter followed the picture of the Oscorp building on the web page and came here, looking up at the more than 100-story building from the outside. Parker, who came here for the first time, didn't know where to go. At this time, the waiter at the front desk greeted him. Hearing her words, Parker quickly approached and asked, "What's wrong?" "Yes, what can I do for you?" she asked with a sweet smile. I don't know. I'm here to see Dr. Connors." Parker hesitated. "Okay. Look for yourself on the left. You're here for an internship, right?" The receptionist mistakenly thought Parker was here for an internship because Dr. Connors happened to have an internship class today. After hearing her words, Parker was stunned for a moment. Then he admitted it. Yes. Okay. You can find your ID on your left." The beautiful receptionist raised her eyebrows at him. Parker came to the side and started looking at the ID. The beautiful receptionist asked, "Can't you find your ID?" "Oh, no. I found it." Parker picked up one of them casually, and the name on it was Rodrigo Guvera. "Okay, Mr. Guvera." The beautiful receptionist smiled at Parker. "Thank you." Parker was secretly delighted. He was just having a headache about how to get in, but he didn't expect the beautiful receptionist to help him a lot. He took the elevator and started to go upstairs. At the same time, the radio began to introduce Osborne Industries. "Welcome to Osborne Industries. Our founder is Norman Osborne. The 108-story Osborne building is the cradle of innovation. Our scientists are constantly advancing the development of national defense, biomedical and chemical technology. The future is born here." Parker came to the gathering place of interns and mixed in the back of the crowd. At this time, a blonde beauty came over. "Welcome to Osborne Industries. My name is Gwen Stacy, a third-year student at Midtown Science High School." and also Dr. Karnas' chief intern. I will accompany you on the tour. Wherever I go, you go. This is a requirement. Just remember this. Everything will be fine. If you forget. Just as Gwen was still talking, she was interrupted by a noise from below. Please. Listen. Listen. Tell them Rodrigo Guvera is here. Tell them. Please. My name is Rodrigo. A man was carried out of the door by 2 security guards, shouting his name continuously. Parker nodded his forehead awkwardly. Gwen watched Rodrigo Guvera being carried away. If you forget, you know what will happen. Let's start. After saying that, she smiled at everyone and began to lead the way, with Parker following at the end of the team. Chapter 108. Rodrigo Guvera looked very ugly. No wonder he couldn't find his ID that day. It turned out that Peter Parker took it away and kicked him out. Rodrigo Guvera was furious. He wanted Peter Parker to apologize to him. Oh, Peter, how could you do this? Uncle Ben looked at him with a look of disappointment. Sorry. Parker opened his mouth to say something, but after seeing Uncle Ben's expression, he resolutely admitted his mistake. What's the use of telling me? You should apologize to Guvera, whose ID you stole. Uncle Ben sprayed him angrily. Okay, I'll go to him to apologize. Parker knew that he had made a mistake and was willing to take responsibility for it. He learned a lot of kind qualities from the first generation, and he had to admit his mistakes. In addition to Rodrigo Guvera, the front desk lady also looked very bad, because she was the one who let Peter Parker in. At this time, the supervisor was calling her over and scolding her. Legitrator didn't dare to vent his anger on Peter Parker, so he could only vent it on the beautiful receptionist. Fortunately, Norman Osborn still had a breath left. He intervened in this matter. He wanted to leave a good impression on Peter Parker and hoped to get the 00 decay rate algorithm from him. So the receptionist can still stay in her position, but she lost her salary for that month. She finally breathed a sigh of relief. Being scolded is not a big deal, but losing her job is a big deal. Gwen led the crowd in front. Come here. Karnas saw Gwen and others walk in, so he stood up and walked over and greeted her. Good afternoon, Gwen. Drive Karnas. Gwen smiled at him. Karnas introduced his full name to many interns and saw the eyes of some people, so he explained. If you are guessing, yes, I'm left-handed. His words caused laughter among the students. I'm not disabled, I'm a scientist. I'm an authority in herpetology, that is, reptiles. If anyone doesn't know this word, it's like a patient with Parkinson's disease, watching in horror as his body slowly loses control, or a patient with macular degeneration, whose eyes become increasingly blurry and dim. I also want to cure myself. I want to create a world without defects. Parker looked at Karnas, who was speaking passionately from behind. Guess how to create it? Karnas looked at the interns and asked a question, and immediately a student raised his hand. Go ahead. Karnas looked at him. Stem cells? This is promising, but I have a more thorough solution. No one. Karnas' words caused the students to whisper, and they were discussing in a low voice. Cross-species gene transplantation. Peter Parker's voice suddenly sounded, and the students all turned their heads to look back. Karnas looked at Parker with a little surprise. Gwen was very surprised when she saw Parker. She remembered that his name was not on the internship list, but she was not sure if she had missed it, so she hurriedly checked again. The cause of Parkinson's disease is the disappearance of brain cells that secrete dopamine, but zebrafish have the ability to regenerate cells at will. If you can give this ability to the patient you mentioned, she will heal herself. Parker also understood how wonderful it would be if this technology was realized. Gwen checked it over and over again and confirmed that Peter Parker's name was not on it. She immediately thought of Rodrigo Guvera, who was carried out, and immediately looked at him with her beautiful eyes wide open. As soon as Parker finished speaking, a student was dissatisfied with being overshadowed by him and retorted, yes, but you have to ignore the gills on her neck. His words caused laughter from everyone, but Karnas immediately stopped them. He looked at Parker with satisfaction, exhaled, and asked, "What's your name?" He is one of the best and smartest students in Midtown Science High School. Gwen knew that Parker used someone else's name, so she immediately introduced him. Really? Hearing this, Karnas looked back at Gwen in surprise. Second in the class. Hearing this, Carnes turned his head and glanced at Parker. Oh. Parker looked at Gwen. Second? Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Gwen smiled at Peter Parker, and it can be seen that the relationship between the two is much better than before. Just as the two were looking at each other, Carnes' phone rang, and he picked it up and took a look. I'm busy. I'll leave you to the capable Mr. C. It's nice to meet you. Carnes said a few words to everyone and left. Please gather here. Gwen activated the instrument next to her, and the Tree of Life of Osmos Industries appeared on it. While everyone was looking at the Tree of Life, Peter Parker walked past them with his head down. Gwen saw him and immediately followed him, saying hi. Parker didn't want to have too much contact with her here, but after hearing Gwen's voice, he hesitated for 2 seconds and turned his head to look at her. What are you doing, Rodrigo? Gwen was a little confused as to why Parker appeared here with Rodrigo's ID. Oh, this. Parker reached out and looked at the ID before remembering that the name on it was Rodrigo. Looking at the somewhat flustered Parker, Gwen couldn't help but smile and then asked again, what are you doing here? I work here. No, I wanted to say I work here, but you work here, so you know I don't work here. Parker was a little incoherent, and he didn't figure out how to make it clear to Gwen for a while. Looking at his embarrassed look, Gwen smiled and asked, are you following me? No, 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 I didn't follow you. No, I didn't know you worked here. Hearing Gwen's words, Parker immediately rejected her idea. He didn't want to become a stalker in Gwen's eyes. Poor lie, Peter. Anyone who saw Parker's flustered look knew it was fake. Harry couldn't help laughing. When he went back, he would definitely use this matter to make fun of him. Unfortunately, Norman didn't allow him to go back, so he could only look at the sky and miss his childhood. HMM. Gwen looked at Parker's appearance, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She knew that Parker must be looking for a hole to hide in. Oh, what a bad performance. Tony couldn't bear to watch it. Garfield Spider couldn't even lie in front of Gwen. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109. Then why are you here? Gwen looked at Parker strangely. I sneaked in because I love science. Parker quickly thought of an excuse for himself. You love science? Gwen looked at Parker with wide eyes in surprise. I'm passionate about it. So you sneaked in? I'm going to lead this tour. Gwen turned her head and glanced at the interns. I know. I'll ask you later. Don't cause me any trouble. Follow the tour group. Gwen glared at him and motioned for him to follow her. I promise I won't cause any trouble, Parker said as he followed her. Gwen had no time to pay attention to Parker for the time being. She still had to lead the tour group. She walked up to everyone and said to them, okay, guys, now I'm going to take you to the biological laboratory. While Gwen turned around and led everyone away from there, Parker quietly retreated, but did not notice that Logitrata was walking behind him. The two of them stumbled, and the documents in Logitrata's hand fell to the ground. Sorry. Parker immediately apologized and squatted down to help him pick up the documents, but accidentally saw a familiar logo on the documents. Logitrata took the documents from him, looked at him twice, and left without caring, leaving Parker watching his leaving figure. Parker followed him silently, and Logitrata walked in front with a heavy heart, not noticing Peter Parker following him behind. Logitrata came to the BioSilk R&D room, unlocked the password, opened the door and walked in, and all his actions were seen by Parker, who remembered them firmly. Soon, two researchers in the laboratory followed the black version of Deng Chao out, talking about something while walking, but Parker couldn't hear it. After they all left, Parker came to the door, looked at the password lock, and began to unlock the password according to Logitrata's operation, and easily opened the door of the laboratory. Logitrata covered his face. It turned out that Peter Parker went in like this. He already knew what would happen next, but he didn't expect that Peter Parker could completely copy his actions just by watching him once. He felt it necessary to upgrade the security measures. At the same time, Tony was a little speechless. For such a large company, the security measures were almost non-existent. Just let Peter Parker enter an important laboratory? He couldn't help but call Pepper and asked her to be careful not to let someone sneak in as easily as Osmus Industries. Pepper naturally looked at the sky curtain and agreed at once. This incident has become a laughing stock all over the world. A company with assets of over 100 billion has such poor security measures. McCann convened a board meeting and severely scolded Rajtrita, ordering him to immediately strengthen security. After Parker came in, he looked at the situation in the laboratory. This is where Osmus Industries used to study high-strength spider silk. Parker looked at the machine thoughtfully. Then he came to a blue room, where the equipment inside was constantly rotating, and a large number of spiders were crawling on it. They produce silk threads, and Osmus Industries researchers have always wanted to study high-strength spider silk, but they have never succeeded. Parker looked at these devices curiously, and pulled the silk thread casually. The silk thread bounced back, and triggered a chain reaction, and the entire device stopped rotating immediately. Parker covered his mouth. He realized that he had caused trouble. Then the silk thread on the equipment began to change, and then spiders fell from it. His head and clothes were also covered with spiders. He slapped them in panic. The equipment stopped for a while, and then started again. While Parker was still in the BioSilk R&D room, Rajtrita had already come to Dr. Connor's. This morning, the results of the messenger RNA sequence experiment came out, which was a bit disappointing. Dr. Connor's tone was a little disappointed. Hearing his words, Rajtrita came to his desk and sat down. What do you mean by disappointing? We've reached a dead end again. There's a problem with the decay rate algorithm. This is expected. Dr. Connors explained the reason for the failure. This was not the first time. They had failed many times. Expected? You said you were close to the goal. Rajtrita looked at Connors dissatisfied. That's right. But it takes time. Connors knew very well that scientific experiments take a lot of time. He doesn't have much time. Norman Osborn is going to die. Connors' doctor. Save him. Rajtrita didn't care about that. If Norman Osborn died, he wouldn't be better off. Connors fell silent after hearing that. Rajtrita stood up and said to him before leaving, otherwise we will all die. Then he left the office. Oh. Peter Parker, how can you touch other people's things casually? Although Uncle Ben heard what Parker said, he couldn't help but get angry after seeing it. He messed up other people's important equipment, and Uncle Ben was very annoyed about it. Now Sky Curtain has exposed what Parker did, and it is unknown whether Osmus Industries will be held responsible for it. Parker was also a little panicked. After all, it was indeed his fault first, and he became Spider-Man because of it. And Uncle Ben began to calculate whether their family's money was enough for compensation. Rajtrita wanted to use this opportunity to force Parker to hand over the algorithm, but after thinking about it carefully, he felt that this was unreliable. Then he thought of a good way to win Peter Parker's favor. Didn't he mess up the equipment? No compensation. As long as he could get the decay rate algorithm, he didn't care about the little problem in the laboratory at all. Parker came out of the laboratory, pretending to be fine. Gwen saw Parker passing by outside and hurried towards him. As soon as Parker turned the corner, he saw Gwen looking at him unhappily in front of him. He smiled awkwardly and wanted to explain, but didn't know what to say. Okay. Give me the ID. Gwen stretched out her hand and asked Parker to give her the ID. Parker had no choice but to take the ID off his chest. But he didn't notice that there was a spider lying on the back of his neck. He handed the ID to Gwen and said, sorry. Gwen took it and turned away. At this time, the spider had crawled to the back of his neck and bit him. Parker was in pain and said ah. He called out. His call caught Gwen's attention. She turned her head and stared at him, then walked straight back. Parker touched the back of his neck strangely. He didn't know what bit him yet. Rajtrita stood up suddenly. The little spider in the BioSilk laboratory can turn people into Spider-Man. This is great news. If they can use technical means to realize a scene of Peter Parker turning into Spider-Man, then they will truly become the largest company in the world. This scene also caused an uproar in the second generation universe. Peter Parker was actually bitten by the little spider of Osmus Industries. Some shareholders with a keen sense of smell immediately prepared to buy their stocks. They can already foresee that Osmos Industries stocks will rise sharply. If not now, when? Chapter 110. Peter Parker is always bitten by all kinds of strange spiders and then becomes Spider-Man. The voice of the narrator suddenly sounded. There are countless people bitten in the infinite multiverse, but almost only Peter Parker can become Spider-Man. This is not an accident, but a necessity. But there are always exceptions. When Peter Parker in a certain universe fails to become Spider-Man, a ghost will be born. She will take on Peter Parker's destiny and become the new Spider-Man, named Ghost Spider-Man Peter Parker. I'll give you a gift. I believe you will like it. Peter Parker looked at the sky with some surprise and confusion. Infinite multiverse? Give me a gift? This is not the first time that the narrator has mentioned this term. It is generally believed in the world that the previous Peter Parker is another him in the parallel universe. Peter Parker and Gwen, Strange and Christine were mentioned before, saying that they are always either destined to be together or separated by yin and yang. But he was not willing to believe in fate, and the sky curtain could let them know a lot of things, so they could avoid them in advance. Instead, he was more curious about what gift the sky curtain gave him, but he searched for a long time and didn't find anything, and the narrator didn't speak again. And Legiterator's face became a little ugly because he was just about to arrange a human experiment. Since Peter Parker could succeed, why couldn't others? As a result, the sky curtain directly poured a basin of cold water on him, which directly extinguished the raging fire in his heart. He began to be a little undecided. If he succeeded, it would be fine. What if he failed? And Tony and Nick Fury were more curious about who the ghost was. Judging from the name, it was still a woman, a female Spider-Man. Parker came out of the gate of Os Industries and took the subway to go home. On the subway, Parker was drowsy and fell asleep on the seat. While sleeping, the spider sense made him feel the situation in the subway, as if he was dreaming. An old man with a black beard and white beard looked at him sleeping soundly, bent down and stared at his face, and secretly put a bottle of beer on Parker's forehead. The bottle stood there steadily, leaving a drop of water on it, which fell on his nose. Parker suddenly woke up, stretched out his hand to slap the beer bottle, and the whole person suddenly jumped up and hung upside down on the ceiling. At this time, he hadn't reacted to what happened. When he opened his eyes, he found himself lying on the ceiling. When he came to his senses, he fell down. Everyone in the subway looked at Parker in surprise. The woman who was sitting next to Parker was unlucky. Her clothes were covered with beer. She complained, "How disgusting. I smell like beer all over now." Spider sense was still working. Parker stood up and said to her, "I didn't mean it. I didn't want to. I'm not." As a result, his hand was on the woman's clothes and he couldn't take it off. Parker tried to take his hand off the woman's clothes while explaining. At first, the old man came to him and shouted at him, "Take your hand away. I want to take my hand away too." Parker kept trying to take his hand away. The old man thought he was trying to take advantage of her, so he pushed him away. As a result, the woman's clothes were torn apart, leaving only a pink bra. The woman was so surprised that she took a breath. The men in the subway stared at this erotic scene with wide eyes and laughed. Parker turned his head away embarrassedly. "Are you kidding?" The old man looked at Parker angrily. Parker apologized quickly, "I'm sorry." But when he turned around, he found that his hands were tightly holding the handrail, as if he was sucked and couldn't let go. Parker's apology was completely unable to calm the old man's anger. He roared again, "Are you kidding?" Another man added fuel to the fire. "Beat him, Rudy. Come on." The old man swung a big swing punch, and Parker's spider sense made his body automatically dodge the attack, and he also kicked the old man and kicked him into a chair. Looking at the old man lying on the ground and screaming in pain, Parker kept apologizing. "Dude, I'm so sorry. Dude, are you okay?" At this time, the man behind Parker tried to sneak attack him, but the spider sense made him move again, and he kicked the two people behind him to the ground with 2 feet. "Beat him up, quick." At this time, the woman was very dissatisfied with Parker and shouted to the other men in the subway. Hearing her words, they all turned into flower protectors and rushed up. A fat black man tried to grab Parker's feet, but was easily kicked back by him. His backward body also knocked down another man who wanted to rush up behind him. Hit him, man. Hit him. Seeing that he couldn't beat Parker with his bare hands, a black man looked at the skateboard beside him. No, man. Don't touch my skateboard. Please, man. Don't. Parker also saw his skateboard and wanted to stop it, but couldn't let go, so he could only say to him. The black man didn't care about that. He picked up the skateboard and smashed it hard at him. Parker had no choice but to raise his arm to block it, and the skateboard broke with a sound. Another white man picked up the broken skateboard and wanted to hit Parker again. Parker grabbed his collar directly, pulled him and hit him directly on the handrail. Then he pulled up the whole handrail with a force and then hit the man in front of him on the head with one end, and the other end hit the old man's vitals. The old man immediately covered his lower body in pain and arched his body. Parker turned around while apologizing, and the handrail in his hand also turned and hit the two people on the head at the same time. Only 2 women were left standing in the whole car. The others were all knocked down. The woman held her backpack to cover her chest, and the other woman also hid far away. As Parker relaxed, the handrail in his hand also fell down automatically. He looked at his palm and began to be dazed. Oh, saying sorry while hitting harder than anyone else. Tony couldn't help laughing out loud. He knew that this was because Peter Parker had just gained superpowers and couldn't control them. This happened. He couldn't help but think of when he first made the Mark armor. He also made a lot of embarrassment, so he kept trying to improve it later to make it easier to wear. The old man and the men on the other side covered their faces. Now everyone knew them. Several of them were easily killed by others. Even the other party did not want to hit them, but just fought back automatically. On the other hand, the woman showed her hot body in front of the whole world. Maybe there will be movie or TV companies looking for her next. After all, many movies and TV series attract attention by selling sex, not to mention that she was touched by Peter Parker himself, which makes her even more famous. Who knows if there will be some crews who like this. Nothing is needed. Just a sentence that Spider-Man touched the woman is enough. As for Peter Parker's reputation, they don't care about this. Otto happily watched the second generation Peter Parker make a fool of himself and asked Toby Spider, "Peter, you haven't been like this before, have you?" "What? No. Of course not." Toby Spider immediately denied it, and at the same time, he kept thanking Cheyenne Moo for only showing the experience of him hitting the wall once, and did not show the fact that he was bullied at school. "Really? We are curious." Rose placed the freshly made pastry in front of Parker, sat down next to Otto, and asked with a smile. "No." Chapter 111. At night, Parker was running home quickly. Because of the fuss on the subway, he was taken to the police station and returned home very late. At this time, Uncle Ben and Aunt May were waiting for him. Uncle Ben was so sleepy that he couldn't help but support his head with his hands. "Oh, hey, sorry, I came back late. I met." Parker began to apologize as soon as he entered the door, but was interrupted by Aunt May when he wanted to explain. "We were worried to death." Aunt May was relieved to see Parker coming back, and then complained. "I know, sorry, be careful." Just as Parker was talking, a fly flew by, and Parker's spider sense automatically activated and let him catch it in an instant. Parker stared at the fly between his fingers, his lips trembling slightly, as if he wanted to eat it. Aunt May looked at him puzzledly. "That's a fly, Peter." Parker came back to his senses after hearing this, and let go of the fly. He didn't know why he suddenly had an appetite for a fly. "Yeah. I'm so sorry for making you stay up late waiting for me. I'm not considerate enough and irresponsible. I'm so hungry." Parker kissed Aunt May and handed her the skateboard in his hand and hurried to the refrigerator. Aunt May looked at Parker in surprise, and even Uncle Ben couldn't help but stand up and watch his actions. Parker took a plate of kebabs from the refrigerator and stuffed it directly into his mouth. Did he drink? Aunt May thought Parker was drunk, so he would do such a thing. "I don't think so." Uncle Ben thought Parker was not the kind of person who would drink, and he didn't smell any alcohol. "This is your kebab. It's better than other kebabs." Parker ate a piece and praised Aunt May's cooking crazily. Aunt May looked at Parker and shook her head involuntarily. She had never seen him like this before. It's very wrong. Uncle Ben nodded involuntarily and said in agreement, yeah, and then whispered in Aunt May's ear, no one likes your meat pie. Hearing his words, Aunt May's expression changed all of a sudden, and she turned her head and glared at Uncle Ben fiercely. At this time, Parker had already searched a bunch of food from the refrigerator, and he barely held it with both hands and mouth. When he passed by Aunt May, he almost dropped it. Aunt May subconsciously wanted to catch it, but Parker caught it himself and said, I can do it myself. Looking at Parker returning to the room, Aunt May and Uncle Ben looked at him in shock. Aunt May couldn't help but say, he took all the frozen cheese macaroni. I saw it, Uncle Ben said, which made Aunt May feel that she had said something nonsense, and immediately turned around to make trouble for him. Why didn't you tell me that you didn't like the meat patties I made? You could have told me 37 years ago. How many meat patties did I make for you? Aunt May said as she stuffed Parker's skateboard to Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben was speechless and couldn't help but cover his forehead with his hands. He probably wouldn't be able to go to bed tonight. What do you mean? He wants to eat flies. Tony couldn't sit still. This second generation Spider-Man was even more outrageous than Toby Spider, and even had an appetite for flies. Spiders eat flies, sir. Jarvis replied lightly. Well, it seems that he seems to be more seriously affected by spiders. The previous Peter Parker didn't have this situation. The corner of the egghead's mouth twitched slightly, and even he couldn't bear to look directly at it. Peter. Rose looked at Toby Spider with a shocked face. She never thought that Parker actually had this hobby. No, I won't eat flies. Toby Spider couldn't help it. He never felt like eating flies. Damn the other Peter Parker, why do you want to eat flies? Toby Spider now had a huge grudge against Garfield Spider. Oh, no. Peter Parker covered his face. What happened that night was actually exposed by Sky Curtain. He was so hungry at that time, and the spider gene had not been completely integrated. So he had the idea of eating flies, but now he has returned to normal. Unfortunately, it is too late. No one would believe him if he told others. When Parker thought that Gwen might dislike him for this, he felt hopeless in life. At the same time, many media that were dissatisfied with Spider-Man began to compete to report and speculate that Peter Parker might eat flies raw in a dark corner, which to some extent hit Spider-Man's prestige. But at this time, the 1.5th generation Spider-Man in the Toby Spider universe stood up and was the first to oppose this statement and published an article in the newspaper to lash out at the media and public intellectuals who made malicious assumptions. He knew that going against Spider-Man would not end well, and he had suffered. Since becoming Spider-Man 1.5, he has now become Spider-Man's most staunch supporter. Parker washed his face and rubbed his eyes constantly. After eating a lot of food, his appetite was finally satisfied, but he still felt something was wrong with his body. He looked at himself in the mirror and suddenly found that there seemed to be something on his neck. He reached out and touched it, and it turned out to be a silk thread extending from the wound where the little spider bit him. He pulled hard, and after a scream of "ah," he looked at the spider silk in front of him, pulled the other end out of his clothes, and was surprised to find that it was a spider. Parker felt very tired, so he soon fell into a deep sleep. Parker looked at this scene and said to Aunt May and the others, "I knew at that time that I might become Spider-Man. I wanted to tell you, but I was too tired and fell asleep." The next day, the sky screen had already started playing, and you all know what happened next. Yeah. Uncle Ben nodded. Parker had already said it once, but the sky screen did not restore the whole process as clearly as the sky screen. Aunt May took a look at the still horrible bathroom. She was still confused at the time why it suddenly became like that. The next morning, Parker, who was still asleep, was awakened by the alarm clock. He slapped the alarm clock to pieces before he woke up. He came to the bathroom and picked up a tube of toothpaste. He didn't even use force, and the toothpaste sprayed out of it. Parker was surprised, and then he didn't take it seriously and put some on the toothbrush. He wanted to turn on the faucet, but he didn't expect that the faucet valve was immediately pulled off by him with a light touch. In a panic, he wanted to take a towel, but he pulled it out with a towel rack, and there were even 2 holes in the wall. Parker tried to stop the water from gushing out, but in the end he could only cover it with a towel to prevent the water from spraying everywhere. He tried to open the door, but the door handle was also pulled off by him. Looking at the door handle in his hand, Parker was extremely shocked. He then wanted to open another door, but remembered what happened just now, so he carefully used the least amount of force and 2 fingers to turn the door handle to open the door, and then quickly fled from the bathroom. Chapter 112. Peter Parker returned to the room, holding a toothpaste in one hand and the door handle in the other, sitting on the bed in a daze. Until this moment, his mind was a mess, and he didn't know what was wrong with him. At this time, he felt more and more that something was wrong with him. He could hear all the sounds around him clearly, and even the movement of the spider crawling on the wall could scare him. Parker stared at the spider crawling on the skateboard, not knowing what he was thinking. At this time, a gust of wind blew, and the curtains were blown by the wind. Parker was immediately startled, and the whole person jumped around like a frightened rabbit and stared at the window. The whole person was so scared that he held the toothbrush in front of him, as if there was a flooding beast there that made his hair stand on end. When he saw that it was the curtains that were moving, he breathed a sigh of relief and sat up straight. So it's so bad. Uncle Ben suddenly realized that, although Parker had said it, it was not as intuitive as the sky screen broadcast. He could guess that Parker was confused at the time. Even though his physical fitness and strength were not as good as the first generation, Parker was still very amazing. If he didn't control his strength well, he would cause great damage. Fortunately, after Parker's continuous efforts, he could roughly control his strength and gradually adapted to the spider sense and would not break things casually. Ha ha ha. Otto was directly amused by Garfield's behavior. Although he didn't want to laugh, it was so funny that Rose laughed with him. Only Toby Spider sat aside with an embarrassed look on his face, looking at Otto eagerly. After a while, Otto stopped laughing. Is this called physical fitness not as good as the first generation? Tony complained. Peter Parker didn't even use any strength, but he casually made 2 more holes on the wall. I think the narrator's meaning is that the upper limit is lower than the first generation, but the lower limit will not change. After all, it's too ridiculous to pull a train with bare hands. Nick Fury said his thoughts lightly, and Tony nodded in agreement. Even if Dr. Banner turned into the Hulk, he might not be able to stop a train moving at full speed. How is the research on that thing going? Do you need help? Our people are also very interested. Boiled Egghead crossed his hands and put them on the table to look at Tony. Tony shrugged and said, it's okay. There is some progress, but it can't be put into practical use. I plan to let Banner help me. Okay. Fuckman nodded. It's okay to have progress. No one knows when the war will happen. Naturally, the faster the technological progress, the better. Tony also knew this, but not everyone can understand that thing. After Tony got it, he studied it day and night, and then he understood a little principle. Parker got off the bed and came to the computer. He started to search the categories of spiders on the internet and kept looking for information about various spiders. Then he began to look up information about the symptoms of spider bites and what to do. Looking at the strange and hideous wounds in the pictures, Parker took a deep breath. The more Parker looked, the more frightened he felt, because he saw many people poisoned by spider bites. He subconsciously touched the wound on the back of his neck. He typed Richard Parker's name and added the word spider at the end. He was typing intently when the keyboard suddenly failed. The English word spider turned into a bunch of garbled characters before he finished typing. Parker glanced down and raised his hands. He saw that his fingers were full of keyboard buttons. He slumped his shoulders helplessly. The scene changed, and Parker was half stepping outside the balcony, constantly swinging, holding a book in his hand, trying to understand the document left by Richard Parker. He compared the 00 decay rate algorithm with the content in the book. At this time, Uncle Ben saw him and walked down and shouted, "Peter, what are you doing?" Parker looked up and saw Uncle Ben below and immediately thought of a reason. "I'm doing homework." Parker didn't want Uncle Ben to know these things, so he evaded the question. "Be careful." Uncle Ben didn't suspect anything, just told him and walked into the house. "Sure." Parker immediately responded, then took back his legs and continued to study attentively. He turned over the back of the book and saw that the author was Dr. Connors, and an idea came to his mind. 00 decay rate algorithm. Connors looked at the only information on it obsessively, but he still recorded it all, even if he could only get a little inspiration from it. Have you thought of a way to get the document in his hand? Legitrator looked at Connor asked. It's hard to snatch something from Spider-Man unless he's willing. Connors also knew the importance of this document, but he really didn't have a good way. What about the high profits? Legitrator is not a person who gives up easily. If Spider-Man is not so powerful and has attracted so much attention, he will definitely grab the decay rate algorithm by any means. I don't know. Let's see. Connors didn't know whether Parker would sell this priceless document, but the next second he looked at the sky in great surprise. Ding dong. The doorbell rang. Connors got up and opened the door, and Peter Parker was outside the door. Drive Connors. Ah, you may not remember me, I am. Parker greeted Connors. He didn't know if Connors still remembered him. Connors interrupted him. You are the intern that day? Parker was a little surprised that Connors actually remembered him. Yes, that's right. Parker nodded. I believe you are a good young man, but this is my home. If you want to see me, please go to my office to make an appointment first. Connors was a little dissatisfied with Parker finding his home like this and turned around and wanted to go back to the house. I'm Richard Parker's son. Parker's words stopped Connors from closing the door, and he looked at Parker in surprise. Connors couldn't help but look at Parker's face carefully, and he really saw a familiar shadow. Peter? Connors, it seems that you have a chance to get the document. Don't let me down. Legitrator patted his shoulder and told him. Connors stared at Peter Parker in the sky in a daze. He never thought that Parker would find him directly and go directly to his home. Peter, it seems that Connors really doesn't know why Richard and the others left. His expression doesn't seem to be lying. Uncle Ben said, after taking a look at Parker. Parker nodded, and he could also feel that Connors had no ill will towards him, but a little guilty. Maybe I can go find him. Chapter 113. In the room, Connors poured Parker a cup of coffee, saying, I'm afraid I can't help you, Peter. I don't know why they left and where they went. Connors thought Parker wanted to ask him about his parents' past, and he was distracted talking, so that he didn't notice that a cup was hit by the coffee pot and was about to fall to the ground. Parker's spider sense was activated, and he grabbed the cup in his hand at an extremely fast speed and held the handle of the cup accurately. Connors looked at Parker in surprise and praised. What a quick reaction. Thank you. Parker was about to take a sip of the cup, but he remembered that Dr. Connors hadn't drunk it yet, so he handed him another cup of coffee first. Thank you. Connors was very satisfied with Parker's behavior, which was a very polite behavior. I've read your book. Parker said. Oh. Connors looked at him, wanting to hear Parker's opinion. Very special. Do you think cross-species gene transplantation is really possible? Parker asked Connors seriously. Of course. This is very possible. Your father and I have been ridiculed for our theories for many years. Not only in the whole society, but also in Osmos Industries. They called us crazy scientists. Connors recounted the sadness and tears of the past. Then your father bred those spiders, and everything changed. The results are extremely encouraging. They are great. He couldn't help but sigh when he said this. We are about to change the lives of millions of people, including my own. Then it was all over. He left. He took the research results away. I know, without him, Connors knew that he couldn't complete the research again by himself, and he couldn't let go of his anger at Richard, because their efforts were completely wasted. I'm angry. So I haven't contacted you and your family, and I'm very sorry for that. Connors looked at Parker apologetically. He knew that it was wrong for him to do so, but he just couldn't convince himself. Listening to Connor's words and looking at his expression, Parker felt that he was not lying and couldn't help licking his lips. After hesitating for a while, he asked, if it works, if your idea is realized, what proportion of the genes of foreign species will be? What side effects may there be? Hearing Parker's question, Connors thought for a while and said, "It's hard to say, because no experimental subjects survived, and the problem always appears." Before Connors finished speaking, Parker quickly interrupted and said, "In the decay rate algorithm?" Seeing that Parker knew the answer so easily, Connors looked at Parker in surprise and replied, "Yes. Okay. Can I?" Parker turned his head and looked at the table and asked, "Of course." So Parker sat down, took out a notebook and a pen, and began to write from memory. Connors couldn't help but move over. Parker wrote the formula of the 00 decay rate algorithm in a notebook, and then placed it in front of Connors. Connors leaned over to look at the formula. "Great. How did you come up with this?" Connors looked up at Parker in shock, unable to believe that Parker could write this formula. Parker was speechless and could only draw a circle around his brain with a pen. Connors thought Parker was a super genius, so he said to him, "Peter, after school one day, can you come to the building to find me?" "Yeah." Parker certainly wouldn't refuse. Connors said, "Thank you." At night, Connors was alone at home, facing the mirror and constantly looking at the formula Parker left for him, and couldn't help looking at his broken right arm. "Peter Parker, I gave you the formula just like that. Did you see it? The sky curtain shows you the formula in full. Complete the research as soon as possible." Legiterator urged Connors to complete the research as soon as possible because Norman Osborn could no longer drag on. He was almost at the end of his rope. Connors nodded. With the 00 decay rate algorithm, he could complete his experiment that had been stagnant for more than 10 years. Parker knew nothing about this, and he didn't care that Connors would get the formula. Anyway, he gave it to Connors in the sky curtain. He wanted to know whether Connors' research would be successful. Legiterator was very glad that he didn't need to find a way to get it. Peter Parker directly showed the formula to them. Although people all over the world have seen the formula, but he doesn't care. He knows very well that without other important theories, it is impossible to reverse Connors' research with just one formula. As long as they do a good job of security and ensure that there is no second Peter Parker. Tony doesn't understand biological research. Although he is somewhat interested in Connors' research, they are in different majors. Banner has studied biology, but he can't replicate Connors' research with just a few words. It's a pity for Egghead. If they can get Connors' information on cross-species gene transplantation, they can also heal the agents who were injured and broken limbs during the mission. Midtown Science High School. School bully Flesh is playing basketball. A member of the school team quickly prepares to lay up. After receiving the basketball, Flesh rushes to him and jumps up to block him directly. Flesh proudly yelled at him, "This won't work." The basketball flew straight towards Missy, a beautiful girl with glasses, who was working on a poster, and knocked over her paint bucket, spilling the paint inside. She stood up and complained loudly, "You did it on purpose." Flesh. A player ran to pick up the ball, and Flesh came over and said to her, "It's okay if it's intentional. You'd better be careful." Parker, who was originally on the side, heard Flesh's words, turned his head to look, then walked to her and greeted her, "Hey." Then he squatted down to help her pick up the overturned paint bucket. "Are you okay?" Missy looked at him without saying anything. At this time, Flesh was blocked again, and the basketball bounced towards them again. Parker, with his back to the basketball, suddenly leaned forward and stretched out his hand to catch the basketball with his backhand. Missy was stunned and looked at Peter Parker in disbelief. She didn't know when Peter Parker had such a reaction ability. Parker looked at the basketball in his hand for a while and was a little unresponsive for a while. Then he realized that his reaction ability was very special. Chapter 114. Flesh walked and yelled to Parker, "Give me the ball, Parker." Parker turned his head to look at him, and Flesh gestured to him to throw the ball over. He turned his head and looked at Missy in front of him. She had been staring at him at this time. He decided to show off to kill Flesh's spirit and help her vent her anger. "Oh, wait a minute." Parker nodded and handed the camera in his other hand to Missy, then walked to the midfield with the basketball. "Hurry up, man." A player couldn't wait and started complaining. "Take it away from me, okay?" Parker smiled at Flesh. His words made Flesh laugh. In his mind, Parker had always been the guy who was easy to bully, and he didn't expect that he had already changed. Flesh walked in front of Parker. Parker held a basketball in one hand, and Flesh glanced at him. A player behind him shouted, "That's it, grab it. Come on. Take it away." Parker smiled at Flesh, and Flesh stretched out his hand suddenly, but Parker reacted very quickly and immediately switched the ball to his other hand from behind. Flesh felt a little embarrassed that he didn't grab it the first time, and his face gradually became ugly, but Parker didn't take it seriously and smiled at him. Flesh stretched out his hand to grab it again, and Parker changed his hand again. This time Flesh was going to be serious, and the whole person tried to grab the ball at the same time. Parker held the basketball in his hand and turned it behind his head. Flesh couldn't keep up with the angle and thought that Parker threw the ball behind him, so he turned around and faced Parker with his back. Parker threw the ball on his back and bounced back to catch it. Flesh realized that he was fooled and stared at him angrily. Seeing him like this, Parker couldn't help laughing. He finally felt relieved. Flesh rushed up to grab the ball, but Parker suddenly slapped him hard with the ball in his hand. Flesh instinctively lowered his body and stepped back, making a defensive posture, which caused a burst of laughter from the people in the gymnasium. Even his teammates covered their faces and laughed. Parker put the ball flat in his hand and stretched it out to him. "Take it. Okay. How about this? Okay. How about this?" Parker covered his eyes with one hand, then showed his right eye to look at him, and then turned his head away. Flesh squinted at Parker, then put one hand on the basketball and tried to take it, but suddenly found that he couldn't take it, so he stretched out both hands and exerted force at the same time. His teammates thought Flesh was playing, so they said to him, "Hurry up. Flesh, stop playing, hurry up, man." Flesh was trying hard to take the basketball from Parker, but he felt that the basketball was rooted in his hand and could not move at all. No matter how hard he tried, he could not succeed. His teammates saw that Flesh was still not moving and began to urge him, "Grab it, hurry up Flesh, grab the ball." Parker also whispered to Flesh to take the ball quickly, but Flesh stared at Parker and took 2 steps back after trying several times. He had guessed that Parker was deliberately embarrassing him. Seeing him retreat, the players on the scene urged him in confusion. They all thought Flesh was playing, but they didn't know that he really couldn't pick it up. Seeing Flesh retreat to the line, Parker also patted the basketball on the spot and showed a provocative smile to Flesh. "Okay. Come on. Come on. Parker." Flesh ordered Parker, and Parker didn't hesitate at all and started running with the ball. Flesh tried to intercept him, but was easily knocked to the ground. Parker took off with a 3-pointer and flew directly into the air. Missy also looked at Parker's figure. Under the gaze of everyone in the gym, Parker dunked the basketball heavily on the basketball stand, and the glass backboard on it exploded directly. Parker fell down with the basketball hoop in his hand. A girl who was blowing gum followed Parker's movements, and the gum she was blowing also broke. This situation made the girls present scream. Everyone looked at Peter Parker in a daze, and even Flesh looked at him in disbelief. Parker didn't expect that he would actually break the basketball stand. After landing, he slowly raised his head and looked at the basketball stand that had been completely scrapped, thinking that this was over. "Oh, Flesh, why did you have to mess with Peter Parker when you can mess with anyone else?" The classmates who often played basketball with Flesh saw this scene and gloating over the misfortune. Flesh lowered his head and said nothing. Since the last time Sky Curtin exposed him for bullying his classmates, he was almost expelled. In the end, it was Peter Parker and Gordon who pleaded for him so he could continue to study in school. He had never experienced such a shameful thing in front of everyone before, so he didn't feel it. Until this moment, he realized how hateful his previous behavior was, so he couldn't hate Parker. In fact, since Sky Curtin appeared, he has always admired Spider-Man in his heart, so when he saw that Peter Parker had the same name as Spider-Man, but was so easy to bully, he was furious and thought that Parker didn't deserve this name, so he made things difficult for Parker. Flash. Gwen shook her head. He always took advantage of his physical advantage to bully others. Now, he had to taste the feeling of being humiliated. Peter's behavior is unacceptable. In the office, Uncle Ben sat with Parker, and the dean was talking to Uncle Ben about what Parker did. They won't let us pay for the rebounds. After coming out of the office, Parker thought Uncle Ben was in a bad mood because he had to pay for the basketball stand. I don't care about rebounds. Is what he just said true? Uncle Ben asked angrily as he walked. What? Parker was a little confused about what Uncle Ben was talking about. I just heard it inside. Did you embarrass that boy? Uncle Ben stopped and stared at Parker. Yeah. But Parker thought it was no big deal. In his heart, Flesh deserved it. But what? He deserved it. Parker said his thoughts without hesitation. Really? Yeah. Parker repeated to confirm his thoughts. Is he the kid who hit you? Really? Uncle Ben looked at Parker. Parker subconsciously avoided his gaze and nodded in acknowledgement. So you're seeking revenge. If that's the case, you must be feeling pretty good about yourself now, right? Am I right? Uncle Ben pointed out Parker's inner thoughts. Chapter 115. Parker was a little unconvinced, but had nothing to say. Seeing his expression, Uncle Ben was sure that what he said was right. I think so too. Because of your stupid behavior, I have to change shifts, so at 9 o'clock tonight, you have to pick up Aunt May. Understand? Uncle Ben looked at Parker, who did not reply, so he asked again, understand? Understand. Parker finally agreed. Uncle Ben nodded with satisfaction, and then saw Gwen behind Parker. She looks familiar. Hearing his words, Parker turned around and found that Gwen was holding a book and looking at them from behind. She is the girl on your computer. Uncle Ben looked at Parker with a smile on his face. Parker shook his head subconsciously, but Uncle Ben had already recognized her. Yeah. Uncle Ben thought about it carefully and confirmed that it was Gwen, so he smiled at her. There is a photo of you on his computer. I'm his parole officer. After Uncle Ben finished his assist, he looked at Parker again and reminded him again, don't forget to pick up Aunt May. Then he turned around and left, leaving Parker and Gwen alone. After he left, Parker smiled awkwardly. Okay. Then he turned his head and looked at Gwen, explaining to her, he has a real personality, that's my uncle. He is used to lying, and he mistook you for someone else. Gwen couldn't help but curl up her lips. She walked up to Parker and listened to Parker's lame cover-up. She couldn't help but roll her eyes and said, oh my god, there is no photo of me on your computer. I took a photo of the debate team, and you are in the debate team. Parker tried to explain something. Gwen nodded. Okay. So, he must have seen me retouching the photo. Parker kept explaining to her, hoping not to leave a bad impression on Gwen. Gwen saw through Parker's thoughts and couldn't help but smile, retouching. Seeing her expression, Parker was a little embarrassed. Please, I don't want to respond to this question. After a brief laugh, Gwen asked, have you been expelled? No, of course not. I haven't been expelled. I have to do community service. Parker told Gwen about the punishment given to him by the school. Gwen was a little embarrassed to keep looking at Parker, so she turned her head and looked behind. Do you want to? I don't know. Hearing his words, Gwen turned back to look at him, but Parker always hesitated when facing Gwen. What do you want to do? Gwen looked at Parker curiously, wanting to hear what he wanted to say. I don't know, but maybe we can. Parker couldn't help scratching his head. We can do something else, or, if you don't want, we can. Gwen agreed without waiting for Parker to finish. Yeah. Really? Gwen agreed too quickly, and Parker didn't react yet. Yeah. Either one. Gwen didn't resist getting along with Parker, so she didn't care too much about what to do. Really? Parker looked at her a little surprised. Yes. Okay. Not bad. It sounds good. Okay. I'm not free now. Not now. I'm very busy now. Gwen agreed to him, making Parker a little incoherent, but he immediately remembered that he had something else to do today. Okay. I know. Me too. Gwen realized that she agreed too quickly and lowered her head a little embarrassedly. But maybe another time. Okay. Goodbye. The atmosphere between Gwen and Parker became more and more ambiguous, and Gwen left there shyly. Parker was left with a smile on his face watching Gwen's back as she left, thinking about how to date her. Gwen would turn around and look at Parker from time to time as she walked in the corridor. Wow. Sweet love of youth. So memorable. Just like you and me back then. Otto looked at Rose beside him, and they smiled at each other. Toby Spider had already left them. Although Rose tried her best to let Toby Spider stay here for dinner, he had no choice but to go to Gwen's house for dinner. Helen's to see specially prepared exquisite meals to entertain him. She likes you, Peter. You have to treat her well, and don't make her sad. Uncle Ben taught Parker seriously. Parker nodded silently, thinking back to Gwen's every move and smile. Since the Sky Curtain appeared, his relationship with Gwen has made rapid progress. The two have gradually become close. After being educated by the Dean, and with him, and Gordon pleading for him, Flash is determined not to bully his classmates anymore, and to take Peter Parker as an example, because it was Parker who persuaded Gordon. Otherwise Gordon would never forgive him. Tony is busy developing the latest battle armor, and has no time to pay attention to the Sky Screen for the time being. He always waits until he is free to let Jarvis replay the video. On the rooftop, Parker is practicing on a skateboard, from not being able to jump over a low paint can to jumping over a triangular cone and a high shelf. Continuously using various items on the rooftop for training, practicing various skateboarding skills, and practicing various difficult Parker moves. Then do push-ups with a skateboard, and even do handstand push-ups with only one side of the skateboard as support. He hangs upside down on the ceiling, looking at the spider in front of him making a web, and he gets an inspiration. He grabs a chain and starts swinging around in the abandoned factory, enjoying the feeling of flying in the air. It was evening, and Parker came to the Osram Industries building as agreed. Carnes led the way, and introduced what they had to him. We have protein structure and ribosomal DNA, chromatography, GMO testing, that's an X-ray camera, there's only one in the world, and we also have human lifeline test, it's SYN. Carnes turned around to look for the instrument he hadn't introduced just now. Parker looked at an instrument in front and said, I remember that. I've seen it before. Carnes turned his head and looked in the direction Parker pointed. Canary device. Yeah. I remember there's a picture of it in my dad's office. Parker recalled his childhood. The idea is very simple. You fill it with antigens. It will form a cloud. It can cover a block, or even a city. In theory, you can cure polio in one afternoon. Carnes took Parker to the front of the Canary device and explained to him what the instrument does. This is amazing. Parker was a little amazed at the effect of this device. But some people disagree. What if it is filled with toxins? If you don't want to participate, you can't escape its coverage. So it is left here. Carnes explained the possible harm it might cause. Because it covers a large area, if someone has bad intentions, no one in the city can escape. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116. Wow, I can't imagine what would happen if someone used the Canary device to launch poison gas bombs, a citizen said with emotion. Indeed, that's why they put it aside and never used it. But if it is used to launch some medicines without side effects, it is really convenient. No matter how convenient it is, we can't joke about our lives, right? New York citizens are talking about the Canary device. They never knew that Osmos Industries had such a device before. Compared with patients who expect quick and convenient treatment, more healthy people are afraid that it will be used for bad things. As Carnes said, if used well, it can indeed cure the disease of an entire city in a very short time. But if it is used by people with bad intentions to launch some terrible things, it will also cause a terrible disaster. Carnes brought Parker to his laboratory and started the experiment in front of him. What you are looking at now is a computer model of a lizard. There are many such amazing creatures now. They have evolved to the point where they can regenerate their limbs at will. In the picture, a lizard's tail was broken off and then grew back, and it was still alive and kicking. You can imagine how jealous I am. We are trying to obtain this ability and transplant it to the experimental subject, Freddy, who is a three-legged mouse. With the help of Connors, Parker input the lizard's data into the broken limb mouse. At this time, his cell phone rang. Parker took a look and saw that it was Uncle Ben's call. "Do you want to answer it?" Seeing that Parker had a call, Connors asked. Parker shook his head and hung up Uncle Ben's phone. At this time, he seemed to have forgotten that he had promised Uncle Ben to pick up Aunt May. "System is preparing. Gene input." Parker took the data simulated by the computer to Connors. "Look. See what I'm going to do?" Connors took the data unit from Parker's hand and put it into the mouse model simulated by the computer. At this time, the computer was preparing for simulation and started caching. "Seize the protein. Seize the immune response." Following Connors' command, the computer began to run the simulation state. "Start the experiment." Waiting. Waiting. Failure. The experimental subject died. "Come on. Come on. Come on." Parker kept muttering as he watched the mouse simulated by the computer fail and die, continuously waiting. Failure. Waiting. Failure. Waiting. Failure. The experimental subject died. Waiting. The mouse model simulated by the computer either grew strange limbs or died on the spot, and the experiments failed many times in a row. Connors saw the results of continuous failures and thought it was another false joy. He couldn't help but sigh and turned around and didn't want to watch anymore. But at this time the computer sent good news. The peptide algorithm is accepted. Regeneration is complete. Vital organs are normal. Blood pressure is normal. Limb regeneration is successful. Simulation state is successful. Seeing the computer simulation is successful, Parker hurriedly grabbed Connors, who turned around and wanted to leave. "Look." Connors looked at the computer simulation results in disbelief. His long-awaited experiment was finally successful. He couldn't help but say, "Great." Parker was also surprised that he actually successfully regenerated his limbs. Looking at the lively little mouse in the simulation, he didn't know what words to use to express his emotions for a while. "Thank you." Connors patted Parker on the shoulder and said with sincere gratitude. Without further ado, Connors immediately started to make lizard potion. "Wow. Incredible." Tony couldn't help but stand up straight, and at the same time, people all over the world exclaimed in amazement. Even Nick Fury couldn't sit still. "You know, the living expenses that SHIELD provides to those agents with broken limbs every year are a considerable expense. If he can save this part of the money, he can build another base. More importantly, these agents can return to the front line, and people all over the world don't have to worry about the regret of limb loss. With the current level of human technology, as long as the limbs can be found in time, they can basically be reconnected successfully, but many times they don't even know where the limbs are lost, let alone find them in time." Dr. Connors' technological success is undoubtedly a blessing to the world. Although this scene is limited to the sky, it has proved that Richard Parker and Dr. Connors' path is feasible. Moreover, at this moment, Peter Parker in the second generation universe already has the information, and Connors followed experiments can be conducted anytime and anywhere, so they are more excited than anyone else, especially the many disabled people. Norman Osborn was so excited that he was shaking, and there was only one thought in his heart: he was saved. He was saved. He and Harry both had hope. The shareholders who had bought Osborn Industrial stocks when Parker was bitten were very happy, and their assets increased again. Parker stayed at home and could hear the warm cheers outside. Thanks to the help of Stacy, the chief of the New York Police Department, the Parker family was not disturbed, but everyone was shouting Peter Parker's name at this time. Uncle Ben thought they might need to move. Now their home has been found, and Parker is about to become Spider-Man, so they can't be a burden. Although Parker felt it was unnecessary, he couldn't resist Uncle Ben's decision, so he had to agree. Uncle Ben immediately called the real estate agent he knew. After watching the sky curtain, Legitrator couldn't help but find Connors directly and asked him to start the experiment immediately. Connors had no objection and went to the laboratory decisively. Gwen looked at Parker on the sky curtain in the room. She was a little surprised that he helped Connors accomplish such a great feat. She was proud of him from the bottom of her heart. In a corner of the room, a small spider was making a web there, but Gwen knew nothing about it. "This is Freddy and Wilma, our three-legged mice." In the office, Connors introduced to Parker the two mice he had been raising, both of whom had broken their right forelimbs like him. Connors took one out of them at random, Parker stretched out his hands to hold it and stroked the head of the little white mouse. Then Connors picked up the lizard potion made according to the experimental data. Okay. Be careful, I don't want to prick you. The human experiment will not start until next week. Connors made a small joke. Parker smiled at him, and Connors carefully injected the drug into the mouse. Then Parker put it back into the glass box, and then waited for the miracle to happen. Chapter 117. At night, Parker returned home happily on his skateboard. Uncle Ben was sitting at the door waiting for him. Parker didn't know that he forgot to pick up Aunt May and greeted him excitedly. I thought you. Parker felt a little strange at this time. It was so late. Why didn't Uncle Ben go to bed yet? Why was he still sitting outside? Did you forget something? Uncle Ben looked at Parker with his hands folded. He could see that Parker had obviously forgotten his instructions. What? Parker looked at him a little puzzled, still not remembering Aunt May. At this time, his cell phone rang. Parker subconsciously wanted to take it out, but was interrupted by Uncle Ben. Don't answer it. But I'm glad it can still be used. You have to apologize to your aunt. Like a man. Go in and apologize. Uncle Ben shouted at Parker. Parker realized that he forgot to pick up Aunt May and followed Uncle Ben into the house. I'm sorry, Aunt May. Parker also knew that he had made a mistake and apologized to Aunt May. Honestly, you don't have to apologize to me. You're Uncle Ben. Aunt May thought it was no big deal, but Uncle Ben didn't think so. Who said it's not a big deal? Uncle Ben interrupted Aunt May. Listen, I'm very sorry, I was distracted by other things. Parker wanted to explain to Uncle Ben why he forgot to pick up Aunt May, but Uncle Ben didn't listen to his explanation. Oh, he was distracted. Uncle Ben said to Aunt May with a little smile, then turned to Parker and said angrily, your aunt, my wife, she has to walk 12 blocks alone in the middle of the night and wait for the train in a remote subway station, just because you were distracted. Parker touched the back of his head a little embarrassedly. He also knew how dangerous New York was at night, and he actually let Aunt May walk such a long way alone. Aunt May couldn't bear to see Parker being lectured by Uncle Ben, and said to him, Ben, honey, to be honest, I can walk home by myself. You don't have to defend him. Uncle Ben stretched out his hand to Aunt May to stop her from defending him. I'm not defending him. You are defending him. Listen to me, kid. Uncle Ben turned to Parker. Okay, go ahead. Parker began to get a little impatient with Uncle Ben's nagging. You are a lot like your father, really, Peter, and that's a good thing. But your father is a man of conviction and principle. He believes that if you can do good things for others, you have a moral obligation to do those things. That's the key. It's not a choice. It's a responsibility. Well said. Very good. Very nice. Then where is he? Parker asked with red eyes. What? Uncle Ben frowned. Where is he? Where is my father? Doesn't he think it's his responsibility to tell me these words in person? Parker said with tears in his eyes, expressing his dissatisfaction with Richard Parker. Oh my god. How dare you say that? Uncle Ben looked at Parker angrily, unable to believe that he actually said that about his dead father. How dare I say that? How dare you say that? Parker completely exploded, yelled at Uncle Ben, then took 2 deep breaths and walked out directly. Where are you going? Peter, come back. Please. Uncle Ben didn't know what was wrong with Parker, and suddenly he was so angry and shouted at him. But Parker ignored him, opened the door and walked out, and then because of his anger, he didn't control his strength well, and a small action of closing the door directly broke the glass on the door. The sound of the broken glass startled Parker, who looked back and then left home without looking back. Uncle Ben and Aunt May were also startled and could only watch Parker run away in the middle of the night. Ben, leave him alone for a while, he will be fine. Aunt May covered her chest and persuaded Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben carefully paid attention to the glass on the ground and approached the door. After opening the door, he walked out and shouted, Peter, Peter. Aunt May was left at home, looking at Uncle Ben's back worriedly. In the dark night, Uncle Ben looked for Parker everywhere, calling his name as he walked, but he didn't notice that Parker was actually on the shelf above his head. Parker knew that Uncle Ben was looking for him, but he was angry and didn't want to pay attention to him. Poor Peter Parker. His heart was full of indignation against his father, but he ignored the love of his family for him. When he lost it, he realized what he had missed. The voice of the narrator made the people watching the sky curtain feel nervous. Peter Parker. This damn fate is always so similar. Tony frowned and watched this scene. The narrator's words reminded him of what happened that night with Toby Spider. Alas, is this the so-called fate? Banner said beside him. Banner was invited to help Tony develop the latest Mark armor because he was too slow alone. The second generation Uncle Ben looked at Parker with a worried look. Parker's face was a little ugly. He apologized to Uncle Ben. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that to you. It's okay, you can tell me anything, but don't run away from home casually. We are all worried about you." Uncle Ben sighed. He didn't know that Parker had always been dissatisfied with Richard Parker. For many years, he has always played the role of a father, but he is not his real father after all. The sky curtain also revealed his death, but he didn't care much. Aunt May sat next to Parker, holding his hand, and said to him, "Uncle Ben just wants you to know that you must do what you promised to others. If you can help with some things, you should help. You have also seen the deeds of another Peter Parker. You should learn from him and take another Peter Parker as an example. We all hope that you can be a good person, whether you are Spider-Man or Peter Parker." Uncle Ben spoke to Parker earnestly, and Parker nodded. Only as a bystander, after watching the life of Toby Spider, could he understand how reasonable Uncle Ben's education is. $2.07. Parker took a bottle of milk coffee to check out at the cashier, but he didn't have enough money. The fat cashier saw that Parker was slow to take out the remaining 2 cents, so he repeated and urged again, $2.07. "There are people waiting to check out behind you." "Yes, I know." Then he took out 2 cents from the change on the side, but of course the cashier would never agree to such a thing. "No, you can leave a penny, but you can't take a penny. You can put change in at any time. You have to spend $10 to take a penny. The store rules." Parker was a little helpless. The cashier asked again, "Do you want to pay? Others are waiting to check out." "I don't have 2 cents. Parker said he didn't have an extra 2 cents. So the fat cashier mocked Parker unceremoniously. "If you don't have money to buy milk, stand aside. Didn't Dad pay enough for milk today? It's just 2 cents. Parker wanted to talk to him, but the cashier didn't give him face. "Stand aside, kid." Chapter 118. Peter. He has no obligation to pay these 2 cents for you. I admit that he is not kind, but helping you is a favor, and not helping is a duty. You can't blame him just because you don't have 2 cents. Uncle Ben looked at Parker's behavior in the sky and felt that Parker was not mature enough. There might be good people in society willing to pay, but not paying does not mean that he must be a bad person. "Yeah, I know, Uncle Ben." Parker nodded. Only as a third-party perspective could he find out where his problem lies. History will not repeat itself, right? Toby Spider sat with Gwen. He recalled that there had been similar bad nights in the sky, but what he feared would come true. Parker saw that the cashier was not interested, so he had to collect his money on the table. A blond man with sunglasses behind him put a dozen beers on the table and knocked over a shelf on the cash register. The cashier looked at him in disbelief. "Are you kidding?" Then he squatted down and started to pack up his things. The man took the opportunity to take the money in the cash register. Parker, whose attention was attracted by the falling shelf, watched the whole scene. The man also noticed that Parker was looking at him and casually threw the milk coffee that Parker couldn't afford to buy to him, and then left the convenience store from the other side. Parker caught the coffee he threw and followed him out of the convenience store. When the cashier stood up and found that the man was gone and the money in the cash register was gone, he realized the problem. He complained, "This is terrible." Then he hurriedly chased out of the convenience store. Parker stood at the door and watched him cross the road and walk farther and farther. The cashier shouted, "Dude, stop. Someone stop that guy." Then he saw Parker standing aside and asked him for help. "Kid, can you help me?" Parker shrugged, "I'm not responsible." Then he turned and left. The cashier didn't see the milk coffee in Parker's hand in a hurry. Who will stop that man? Seeing that Parker refused to help him, the cashier could only reach out to stop the passing vehicles while chasing after the blond man in sunglasses. Hey, hey, don't run. Seeing the cashier catching up, the man in sunglasses ran away. The cashier was too fat and couldn't catch up with him at all. He could only chase and shout, hoping that someone would help. Uncle Ben, who was looking for Parker, heard the cashier's voice. Someone come. Stop that man. The man in sunglasses ran all the way, and because he turned too sharply on the sidewalk, he dropped the beer in his hand. But he didn't bother to pick up the beer. He got up and continued to run, but there were still pedestrians on the sidewalk. After he pushed away the two women who blocked him, he also lost his footing and fell to the ground. It happened to fall in front of Uncle Ben, and a pistol also fell out at the same time. Uncle Ben saw the pistol and saw him getting up to take the gun, so he yelled and fought with him. In a panic, the man in sunglasses pulled the trigger. With a gunshot bang, Uncle Ben fell to the ground holding his stomach. The man in sunglasses slowly stood up and immediately fled from there. Parker heard the gunshot in the distance. The spider sense gave him an ominous premonition. He slowly walked across the road and saw Uncle Ben lying on the ground. He squatted down in disbelief and covered his wound. OMG. Oh my god. Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben. Call an ambulance. Call an ambulance. Uncle Ben. Blood kept flowing out of the wound. Parker tried to press the wound to stop the bleeding, but it was useless. Oh my god. Parker desperately called Uncle Ben with tears in his eyes. Unfortunately, Uncle Ben has stopped breathing. Parker felt his heartbeat stop, stopped pressing the wound, and lay on him crying. Fuck. Tony couldn't help cursing. What kind of shitty fate is this? Why does Peter Parker always have to lose his relatives to grow up? Oh. Peter Parker. We are in the same boat. They both lost their dear uncles. Pepper sat next to Tony. Ben. Aunt May looked at him worriedly, and Uncle Ben sighed. Peter, when you have the ability to help, but don't help others, it will lead to bad consequences. This is the meaning of what I said to you in the sky. Uncle Ben didn't care about his life or death, but he wanted to teach Peter Parker better, so that even if he died, he could have an explanation to Richard Parker. Parker looked at the crying self on the sky with red eyes. Only after losing will he cherish. At this moment, he deeply felt what Toby Spider felt at the time. And Uncle Ben practiced with his own death what he said to Parker was also the best teaching for him. Parker swore that he would change himself, not let Uncle Ben down, and he would not let Uncle Ben die. He wanted to become Spider-Man, and then practice Uncle Ben's beliefs. Harry shook his head looking at the sky curtain. Uncle Ben of both Spider-Mans died like this. Poor Peter. Norman refused to let him go back and said he would make a decision after watching the sky curtain. Toby Spider also felt the same way. Gwen took his hand and put it in her palm. Toby Spider looked at her worried eyes and smiled at her to show that he was fine. At home, a black police officer was telling Aunt May, who had just cried, about the murderer. The witness described the murderer to the sketch artist. I need you to identify him. He placed the sketch of the murderer in front of Aunt May. Aunt May looked at it carefully and shook her head. No, I don't know him. I don't expect you to know him, ma'am. The detectives are investigating the case. Let's see what they find. Parker stood aside and listened to them in despair. After the police got up and were about to leave, Parker stopped him. Can you give me this? He asked the police for the murderer's sketch, and the police certainly wouldn't refuse. At the same time, the black police officer did not forget to remind Parker, there is one more thing. He has a star tattoo on his left hand. Parker looked at the sketch and instantly recalled the blonde man with sunglasses in the convenience store. He also had a star tattoo on his hand. Parker looked at Aunt May, who was crying, and felt remorseful. Parker came to the bathroom and squatted behind the door. He held a mobile phone with the last phone recording Uncle Ben left for him before he died. He clicked on the phone recording, and Uncle Ben's voice came from it. It can be clearly seen that his hands were still stained with Uncle Ben's blood, and he didn't even have time to wash his hands. Peter, I know I'm not doing well recently. I'm sorry for this. I understand how you feel. Parker listened to Uncle Ben apologizing to him on the phone, covering his face sadly and choking. He regretted why he didn't answer the phone at that time, and why Uncle Ben passed by him, and he didn't go down. All this was caused by him. If he had stopped the man in sunglasses, Uncle Ben would not have died at all. He killed Uncle Ben. Chapter 119. I know what he's thinking. Just like me. Toby Spider looked at Garfield Spider on the sky. He was the one who felt the most, because they had experienced the same thing. When he knew that he would kill Uncle Ben, he also didn't sleep well for a while, and it took a while for him to get better. At this time, Harry walked into the house and said to him, "Hi, brother, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Why are you here?" Toby Spider felt a little strange about why Harry came suddenly. "Nothing, just seeing Uncle Ben's death happen again. I'm afraid you'll be sad, so I came to make you happy." Harry hugged Toby Spider's neck and smiled. "Please, you don't have to worry about me. I'm fine." Toby Spider rolled his eyes and repeated again, then asked, "What happened to Marco?" "He's fine, don't worry. He's lucky. It's nothing serious. The bullet didn't hit any organs. The doctor estimates that he will be discharged from the hospital in a while." Harry talked about Marco's situation, and Toby Spider asked, "What do you plan to do with him after he is discharged from the hospital?" "I plan to let him be my driver. He saved my life, so I naturally can't treat him badly. And I restarted the research on physical enhancers, starting from the original formula this time." "Really?" Parker was a little surprised that Harry would restart this research. "Didn't they say that no one would understand after Dr. She died?" "There's no way. After the shooting, I always felt uneasy. The feeling of hanging by a thread is not good." Harry still feels scared when he thinks of Edda's shots. It was precisely because of Edda's incident that prompted Harry to make up his mind to restart the research. Otherwise he would not waste so much manpower and resources. At school, Parker was walking in a corridor full of students. Everyone knew what happened at Parker's home. Seeing him coming, they all looked at him, giving way to him. Parker opened his locker and put the books inside into his backpack. At this time, Flesh saw him, walked towards him and shouted, "Hey, Parker." Parker heard Flesh's voice and said without turning his head, "Not today. Don't be like this. I just want to talk to you." Flesh patted his shoulder. Parker turned around suddenly, lifted Flesh up, and hit him against the locker. Feel better, right?" Flesh groaned in pain and looked at Parker and said, and the classmates also gathered around, "Listen, your uncle died. I feel sorry. I understand. I'm very sorry. Okay." Listening to Flesh's words, Parker put him down, lowered his head, picked up his backpack, and turned to leave. Gwen silently watched Parker from a distance and saw that he was very depressed, so she called him Peter. Then she hugged him. Gwen wanted to use her hug to make Parker happy, but Parker still couldn't cheer up. After the hug, she left directly, leaving Gwen looking at his back worriedly. Drive Connors also came to comfort the sad Parker and brought a mouse that had successfully grown a broken limb after the previous experiment for him to see, hoping to inspire Parker. But Parker was still immersed in the world where he killed Uncle Ben, tears streaming down his face. Looking at Aunt May who had waited for him and fell asleep on the sofa, Parker gently covered her with the quilt. Then he left the room through the window and saw a wanted poster of the sketch of a blonde man in sunglasses on his computer desk. Flash. Parker was a little surprised that he would comfort himself. Was he still the school bully? Today Parker officially returned to school. Because of the incident with the sky curtain, he stayed at home for several days and only came to school today. Gwen was surprised to see Parker coming to class. Parker smiled at her. Gwen whispered, "Is Uncle okay?" Parker shook his head to indicate that he was fine, and they were all fine. Seeing this, Gwen felt relieved. "Hey, Parker." Flesh came over and greeted Parker. Since that incident, they had become friends, as well as Gordon. Parker nodded at him and continued to whisper to Gwen. Parker was walking alone on the dark street. When he passed an alley, he saw a man holding a woman and yelled, "Listen, stay away from her. Do you like to bully girls? Do you like to beat up the elderly?" Parker walked into the alley and questioned. "Hey, man, go your way. You're in the wrong place, buddy." The man pointed at Parker and threatened him that he'd better not meddle in other people's business. "When was the last time you were in Queens?" "Wait." Parker walked up to him and asked. Seeing that he didn't answer, he pushed him hard. "I'm asking you a question." After being pushed, the man took out a pistol from his pocket. Seeing this, the woman quickly stopped him and said, "Nicky, don't do this." Parker quickly grabbed his wrist, and the powerful force made the man unable to resist at all. "Is this a gun? Do you want to kill me too?" Under Parker's grip, the man was forced to let go, and the pistol fell to the ground. Parker held him with one hand and punched him several times with the other hand. Seeing this, the woman quickly stopped him and said, "Hey, stop it." But Parker ignored her and threw the man against the wall. Seeing this, several other men came up with wooden sticks to help. One of them hit Parker's back with a wooden stick, but Parker didn't feel it at all. He first knocked one man down with an elbow, and then punched the man under him twice. Then he stood up and grabbed the man with the wooden stick and threw him against the wall. The woman next to him kept trying to stop Parker's actions. "Wait, don't hit Nicky." She pointed at Parker and said to the men who ran out after hearing the noise, "This guy's crazy." Parker saw that the other side had more people and more power, and he was a little timid and started to run away. Several people immediately chased him. Parker easily climbed over the iron fence in the alley. Others could only slowly crawl over. Parker ran quickly in the alley. He jumped against the wall easily, then stepped on the wall again, and jumped directly onto a fire hose, and then climbed up the stairs along it. The people below saw that Parker climbed too fast, so they chose to split into two groups to block him at the other end. Parker climbed on the fire ladder and went back. After a while, Parker began to climb up and soon reached the roof. He thought he had gotten rid of them, but he didn't expect them to catch up with him. So he ran again and started Parker. He didn't forget to fight back during the Parker. Ordinary people couldn't stand Spider-Man's strength and were knocked to the ground. Then he jumped onto the other side of the house. One of them tried to pull his legs, but he kicked him over easily. Chapter 120. Although Parker temporarily got rid of the people below, a gangster had already climbed up from the other side and was looking at him viciously, so Parker jumped directly onto the house where he was. The gangster man saw Parker actually coming towards him, and he came forward and threw a big punch. Parker quickly lowered his body to avoid his attack, then grabbed his feet and threw him up. The man almost fell down after rotating 360 degrees in the air. Parker grabbed his hand and pulled up his left sleeve to check if there was a star tattoo. After finding that he had no tattoo, Parker looked at the man's horrified expression, slowly pulled him up, and let him hold onto the eaves. Parker was about to leave when he found that someone else was coming from the other side, so he turned around and walked to the other side, but suddenly his feet were empty and he fell off the roof. Parker screamed and fell on a ring. The gangster shouted, "I know what you look like. Did you hear me? I've seen your face." Parker lay on the ring for a while before getting up and stretching his muscles. Then he saw the mask pattern on the wall, which gave him some inspiration. Adding the words of the gangster just now, Parker knew that he needed a set of equipment to hide his identity, and he didn't want to fall from the top again. Peter, he is more thinking about revenge than justice now. Uncle Ben knew what Parker was thinking. Gwen asked a little strangely, "Peter, why don't you shoot Spider Silk?" Parker in the sky is very agile and his Parker moves are very cool, but he just doesn't shoot Spider Silk. I don't know. Parker scratched his head. It's not that he hasn't tried to shoot Spider Silk, but he has never succeeded. He always thought that he might not have developed the ability of Spider Silk, and never thought about why Toby Spider was called Spider Spirit while he was Spider-Man. Parker began to design equipment for himself. First of all, he needed a hood. He used class time to constantly design the image of his hood. Gwen didn't know what Parker was doing. He kept writing and drawing in his notebook mysteriously, and she was embarrassed to see it. Parker began to sew a simple spider hood with needle and thread in his room. At night, is that all? A man was robbing, and Parker jumped down from above, and the blonde man didn't notice his arrival. The man just wanted to take the money from the victim, but Parker lifted him up and hit him against the wall. After checking his left hand, he threw him down directly. As he left the dark environment, Parker's image at this time also appeared in the eyes of everyone, and his unique dress attracted the attention of passers-by. Made from genetically enhanced spiders, the tensile strength of Osmos biological silk is unparalleled. We are just beginning to understand its potential industrial application value. A small ball can safely store hundreds of meters of this lightweight cable. Back home, Parker looked at the introduction of spider silk from Osmos Industries on the computer. A small spider silk can pull an airplane. He threw the cup noodles he had eaten into the trash can and began to study the spider silk launcher himself. He disassembled a watch, placed the container of spider silk bought from Osmos Industries in it, and began to try to make a spider silk launcher. When he first tried, he failed repeatedly. Either the current was too large, causing the launcher to be directly scrapped, or the direction could not be controlled, and the spider silk flew everywhere, covering Parker's face. But soon Parker found the trick and accurately launched the spider silk, which stuck to the center of his wall decoration. Parker touched it and confirmed that its strength was no problem. He was very satisfied with it. What? Shouldn't he shoot the spider silk himself? Why does he need an external device? Tony sat up straight and asked in confusion. Pepper didn't understand what was going on either and looked at the sky curiously. Hey, what's going on? Hey, answer me. Tony yelled at the sky. He urgently needed an explanation. Tony Stark, don't shout. Why do you think the first generation is a spider spirit and the second generation is Spider-Man? In the infinite multiverse, only the first generation is special. The voice of the narrator sounded. In other words, the first generation is a special case, and other Spider-Men do not have the ability to shoot spider silk? Tony exhaled a breath of turbid air. No wonder he didn't see the scene of Garfield's spider shooting spider silk before. At this time, everyone was able to understand this situation. Originally, they were all preconceived by Toby Spider, the spider spirit, and mistakenly thought that Spider-Man was a special case. Spider-Man should have the ability to launch spider silk by himself, but this is wrong. Normal Spider-Man needs to use equipment to launch spider silk, with the exception of Toby Spider, who is much better than other Spider-Man in terms of physical fitness. Raj Stritter watched Parker use the biological silk of Osmos Industries to make a spider silk launcher, and he didn't know what he was thinking. Parker completed the transformation of the spider silk launcher and couldn't wait to come to the rooftop to prepare for the test. He did a double-handed handstand push-up on the edge. Then he was still not satisfied and changed to supporting with only 10 fingers, then 2 fingers on each side, but he still felt no pressure, so he simply loosened his left hand and supported his body with only the index and middle fingers of his right hand. As Parker tilted his body, he fell downstairs. Feeling the weightlessness of falling in midair, Parker cheered excitedly. When he was close to the ground, he used the launcher to launch spider silk, which stuck to the hanging basket used by the glass cleaner outside the building, and landed on the ground successfully. If you don't look at the cutlery on the breakfast table that he crushed behind him, this experiment is completely successful. Back in the room, Parker was hanging upside down in the corner like a spider, designing his own spider suit, when his police receiver rang. Attention, police officers near the 13th precinct. We received a report of a robbery at the intersection of West 19th Street and Broadway. The suspect is a white male in his 30s. He weighs 170 to 180 pounds. Shoulder-length blonde hair. He is running east along 19th Street. Parker waited from morning to night, just to wait for the murderer who killed Uncle Ben to appear again. When he heard that a criminal who matched the description appeared, Parker immediately put on a hood. Then he quickly ran up and jumped down from the tall building. In midair, Parker fired a spider silk to stick to a helicopter and chased the criminal's position with the helicopter. Chapter 121. At this time, the suspect was running away in a panic on the road. Parker came behind him with a spider silk and then shot a spider silk to stick to his back. The man was pulled to the ground by the sudden pulling force. Parker immediately stepped forward and pulled open his sleeves. Just as he found that there was no tattoo, the man's adrenaline burst out in panic. He suddenly broke free from Parker's hand and got up and continued to run. Seeing that he was not the murderer who killed Uncle Ben, Parker did not entangle too much and directly crossed the road and ran away from the other side. In the police station, George Stacy asked his men while walking, "Do you have a description of his appearance?" "No, he was wearing a mask." "Mask?" George turned his head and looked at him in surprise. Most of his victims are suspects with a long criminal record. People call him a vigilante. But George disagreed with him. He is not a vigilante, he is an anarchist. Just as George refuted his men, a man screamed and fell from their heads and was hung in the air. Someone come to save me. Arrest me. Put me down. George Stussy turned his head after hearing the scream and looked at the man hanging in front of the police station with a surprised face, begging for mercy. There were many citizens in front of the door. They saw Parker crawling on the building opposite the police station, and they took out their mobile phones to take pictures. Everyone looked at Parker's actions in surprise. George's face was a little ugly because Parker's behavior seemed to say that their police were incompetent. They couldn't even catch criminals. How could he be happy as the chief of the police station? Oh. I didn't mean it. Parker looked at George's expression in the sky and suddenly realized that he was slapping the police in the face by doing this. Today Gwen invited Parker to her house because George wanted to meet Parker and he had something to say to him. He took a sip of coffee. Peter, we have caught the murderer who killed your uncle in the Sky Dome. He wanted to flee to Mexico but was reported by the neighbors. We caught him before he escaped from New York. Oh, thank you. I was just going to find him. Parker was a little surprised at the speed of the police. He was going to go out to find him tonight. George Stussy put down the coffee in his hand helplessly, looked at Parker seriously and said, Peter, I know you are kind. You want to learn from another Peter Parker to fight criminals. This is good, but you have to consider the safety of your family. Parker was silent after hearing this. For superheroes, family is their biggest constraint, especially since they were exposed. Uncle Ben and Aunt May had to move just to avoid being a burden to him. Uncle Ben said that, if I have the ability, I have the obligation. Cheyenne Moo also said that it was not an accident that I became Spider-Man, but a necessity. Parker remembered what Uncle Ben said to him, and he was determined to carry it through to the end. George Stussy sighed. He was more worried about his daughter. Gwen obviously had her heart tied to Parker, and he was afraid that his daughter would be hurt. At this time, Gwen was changing clothes in her room. She had just put on her coat, but she didn't notice that a spider was quietly crawling on her coat. Parker was still talking to George, but suddenly Gwen screamed. Ah! Parker was startled and stood up immediately. Gwen. George's reaction was not much slower, and he immediately rushed to Gwen's room, and Parker immediately followed him. Gwen. Are you okay? The door was locked, and George couldn't open it. Parker directly broke open the door. Gwen was standing there in a daze in the room. Seeing her father and Parker rushing in, Gwen finally reacted. Gwen subconsciously looked at the ground. There was a spider there just now, but now it has disappeared. Your gift has been signed for, Peter Parker. Once this gift is sent, it will not be returned or exchanged. Don't worry, it is non-toxic and has no side effects. The voice of the narrator reappeared mysteriously. Parker looked up at the sky. What do you mean? What exactly is the gift you are talking about? Parker never saw the so-called gift from beginning to end. Just now, a spider bit me. Gwen came back to her senses and said with lingering fear. George Stussy turned her head and looked at her baby daughter with an incredible look on her face. She was also bitten by a spider? She also wants to become Spider-Man? There. The spider just fell to the ground and then turned into white light and disappeared. Gwen pointed to the ground. She thought she was dazzled just now, but the wound on the back of her hand reminded her clearly that this was not a dream. So the gift from the sky is to make you Spider-Man too? Are you the ghost? Parker immediately thought of the ghost Spider-Man who was carrying Peter Parker's destiny as mentioned by the sky's narration. The ghost is a woman, and Gwen is also a woman. Parker doesn't think this is a coincidence. George looked at Gwen with some worry. He felt that Gwen's expression seemed a little wrong. Parker's spider sense was more sensitive, and he noticed earlier that Gwen's body was undergoing some changes. I don't know. Gwen suddenly felt very tired, very sleepy, and wanted to sleep. Then she began to be in a trance, as if she saw Parker coming forward to hug her, and then she knew nothing. Parker returned home from the window, took off his coat and immediately came to the computer to start researching the materials needed to make the battlesuit. Spandex, all of it must be spandex. Parker checked the sportswear of most athletes and found that they were almost all wearing spandex suits. At school, as Spider-Man's reputation spread, Parker's campus was full of people discussing Spider-Man. A student held a tablet in his hand and talked to his classmates. This guy's huge velocity vector is the combined effect of mass and acceleration. Come on. You know better than anyone. The weight of the pendulum has no effect on the swing speed. It does not affect the frequency, but it will affect the momentum. Parker followed them, silently listening to their academic discussions while swinging spider silk. Sometimes he could also get some inspiration from them. Soon, Parker finished making the suit. He painted the suit himself, designed spider patterns, installed new goggles, and installed spider silk launchers. The scene changed to Parker's first-person perspective. He climbed upstairs to the familiar rooftop, shuttled between high-rise buildings, and finally landed outside a building. Through the glass outside the building, everyone could see his outfit at this time. Compared with Tobey's spider suit, Garfield's spider suit had a more textured feel and clearer patterns. Parker stood on top of the tall building, looking at the streets of New York below. He felt a sense of heroism in his heart. At this time, his cell phone rang suddenly. Parker quickly took out his cell phone from his backpack and answered the call. Hey, Aunt May. Okay. Eggs. Organic. No problem. Chapter 122. Haha, even superheroes have to go shopping. Tony was still immersed in Parker's world, as if he had just created the Mark II, but this atmosphere was interrupted by a phone call from Aunt May. Playboys don't have to buy groceries, right? Rod glanced at him. Parker is not Tony, who can have everything he wants. Oh, how can you say that? I also buy groceries occasionally. Tony looked serious. Rod complained, if you keep doing this, I will tell Pepper that you want to cook for her. No, no, no. Hey, brother, you can't tell her please. Please. Tony begged for mercy immediately. He still remembered the scene when he spent 3 hours frying an egg for Pepper that was burnt on one side and undercooked on the other. That was one of the few times he was completely embarrassed in front of Pepper. At that time, Pepper didn't even know how to eat. Since then, Tony never mentioned his cooking. The reason why Rod knew about this was that Tony himself let it slip when he was drunk one time. Now, it became a good way for Rod to laugh at him. At night, a man was reversing into a garage. After parking and locking the car, he hurriedly left. A man in a dark corner walked to the front of the car and installed a password cracker on it. While the man was waiting to crack the password, he looked around to see if anyone was passing by. The cracker soon unlocked the door successfully, and the man opened the door and got in. When he got into the car, there was an extra person in the back seat. It was Parker. He had entered the car without knowing when. The man was trying to start the car and didn't notice his presence at all. Parker watched the man tinkering for a while and couldn't help coughing. The sudden sound scared the man. He turned his head and found Parker's presence. If you want to steal a car in the future, don't dress like a car thief, man. Parker shook his head and looked at the man. Who are you? A policeman? The man was frightened by Parker and gasped for a while. He looked at Parker in a tights and asked, really? You think I'm a policeman? A policeman in a red and blue tights? Parker looked at him in disbelief. He didn't know how he thought he could be a policeman. Parker was speechless. You really are. Parker shot spider silk on his nose. The sudden attack made the man subconsciously want to escape from the car. He opened the door, and Parker closed the door with spider silk. He repeated it several times. You really have the mind of a scholar, sir. If you want to say that I look like a skier, it's fine. Good idea. The man saw that he couldn't open the car door, so he opened the car window. Window, climb out of the window. Good. Very good. Parker sat in the car and watched the man escape from the window with effort, praising him. When the man climbed out of the car, stood up and looked inside, Parker had disappeared inside. He looked around and didn't see Parker. Just as he was about to run away, Parker appeared from behind him. Watch out for your crotch. Parker yelled and then knocked him to the ground with a scissor kick. The man got up and took out a knife and said to Parker, let me go. Parker took a look at the knife in his hand and decided to tease him. He pretended to be very scared and raised his hands to kneel on the ground and said, is that a knife? Is it a real knife? The man thought Parker was really scared. Yes. It's a real knife. This is my weakness, the knife. Let me go. The man didn't know what Parker was doing. He just wanted to leave here. The shadow Parker had left on him just now was very big. Whatever you want, don't play with the knife. Parker suddenly shot out spider silk and stuck the man's wrist holding the knife to the wall behind him. Oh, this is too easy. Parker felt a little bored. What is this? The man tried desperately to get his hand off the wall, but he couldn't get it off. After turning around on the spot, Parker answered, I invented the spider silk myself. You may not want to know. Hurry up, let me go. The man saw that he couldn't get rid of the spider silk, so he shouted at Parker. After hearing this, Parker also stuck his other hand to the wall with spider silk. The man couldn't move at all, but Parker hadn't had enough fun yet. He pretended to sneeze. Okay, wait a minute. Stop it, man. No. The man began to beg for mercy, but Parker ignored him and pretended to sneeze. The man cried out in pain as his brother was severely injured. Please, let me go. Stop. Seeing that he could not get rid of the restraints at all, the man had to continue begging for mercy. But Parker still hadn't had enough fun. He continuously fired spider silk, sticking the man to the wall. Looking at his appearance, Parker couldn't help but applaud and laughed. But as the one being fooled, the man was not happy at all. This is not fun. Help. This is very interesting. Parker saw the man start to shout for help, made a shushing gesture at the corner of his mouth, then raised his hand and fired a spider silk, completely covering his mouth and nose, and the man couldn't breathe. Woo woo woo. Parker tilted his head and looked at the man's painful appearance of being unable to breathe. He pounced in front of him like a tiger, first checked his left wrist, and confirmed that he was not the person he was looking for. The situation could be much worse. Don't move. The man couldn't breathe for a long time and kept shaking his head. Parker pinched his face and poked the spider silk on his nostrils for him to prevent him from suffocating. The man who survived the robbery breathed in fresh air. At this time, a patrol officer passed by and found them. Parker was not afraid when he saw the police. The police are here. I caught him. Parker wanted to explain the situation to the police, but the police mistook him for a criminal and pointed his gun at him. Don't move. He can't go anywhere. Parker thought he was talking to the man, but the police said to him, the one wearing a tights. Don't move. Are you serious? Parker raised his hands. Who are you? The police asked him seriously. No one can understand the concept of this mask. Hearing this, Parker put down his raised hands and complained. If he wanted others to know who he was, why did he wear a mask? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123. Just as he was about to get closer, the police officer shouted "Don't move," and fired several shots, but Parker dodged all the bullets easily. The bullet almost hit the man behind him. Parker jumped up and took the gun away. He pointed the gun at him and said angrily, "I completed 80% of your work. And this? Is this your reward for me?" He threw the gun aside angrily, and then a large group of police cars arrived. Parker immediately began to flee the scene. Parker ran to the street, grabbed the back of a small pickup truck, and then jumped onto the roof. The driver in the car felt something on the roof and looked up in surprise. Parker jumped onto a medium-sized truck on the other side, lay on the side of the truck, and began to climb up. After reaching the roof, he shot spider silk towards the street lamp next to him and left the road above with the spider silk. Okay, this is so fun. Parker was chased by the police for the first time in his life. He was not nervous, but found it very fun because he was skilled and brave. He swung on the spider silk and flew under the bridge. He ran into a bus head-on. He was still in the mood to joke with the driver, but the driver and the passengers in the car were scared by him. Parker rolled on the side of the bus with the spider silk. He had to let go of the spider silk and fell to the ground. At this time, a taxi drove over and saw someone on the ground. The driver stepped on the brakes. What are you doing?" The driver leaned his head out of the window and cursed. Parker ignored him and jumped up directly on his car, launching spider silk and wandering on the road. "Hey, be careful. I'm swinging. I'm swinging. Woohoo." Parker kept moving under the bridge with the spider silk. On the bridge, many policemen watched Parker getting farther and farther away from the bridge until they could no longer see him. George Stacy came over with a dissatisfied look on his face and scolded, "So, 38 elite police officers in New York. They are helpless against a person wearing a tights. Am I right?" He looked at the police officers in front of him with a smile on his face. Tonight's operation can be said to be a complete failure. He felt ashamed. Wow. That policeman, how could he just shoot at him? He just subdued a criminal. A Spider-Man fan was extremely dissatisfied with the actions of the mounted police in the sky. His words aroused the sympathy of many citizens. In any case, he shot without authorization before Peter Parker made any threatening moves. This is absolutely not acceptable. Because of what happened in the sky, many New York citizens surrounded the police station and asked Chief George Stacy to come out and give them an explanation. At this time, George was staying at home with Parker, nervously looking at Gwen, who was still unconscious, and her mother kept wiping the sweat off her face. At this time, George's cell phone rang. He hung up without even looking at it, but the calls kept coming. He had no choice but to pick it up, only to find out that the New York Police Department was surrounded by people. He sighed. Gwen was still unconscious, and he couldn't be with him. Parker knew something must have happened by looking at George's expression. He asked, "What happened?" George Stacy glared at Parker fiercely, causing Parker to look at him innocently, not understanding why George suddenly changed his face. George motioned Parker to come out with him, and when he came outside, he looked at him unhappily. "My people told me that, because the mounted policeman in the Skydome shot you, the citizens surrounded the police station and asked me to give them an explanation and apologize to you." "Oh." Parker covered his mouth. I don't need it. That's just a matter in the Skydome." No wonder George looked at him unkindly. It turned out to be his fault. "You don't need it, but your fans think you do." George was a little helpless. Spider-Man has too many fans. When Toby Spider was here, they had already released countless items related to the name of Spider-Man. There are all kinds of things, from toys, daily necessities, comics and other messy things, to supermarkets, restaurants, etc. And even someone registered Spider-Man Co. Limited. Now that the genuine Spider-Man has come out, those who have used the name of Spider-Man are at a loss. They began to try to obtain the right to use the Spider-Man IP from Parker, but they haven't figured out how to contact Parker. Because Gwen's identity was checked clearly, and even the big guys in New York called and ordered him to deal with the relationship with Spider-Man as soon as possible, and asked them not to have conflicts with Spider-Man. That's why George asked Gwen to call Parker to his house today. George knew that, if he wanted to calm the anger of the citizens, it would be best to pull Parker out as a shield. Parker naturally couldn't make things difficult for his future father-in-law, so he readily agreed to go with him. Parker wanted to open the door quietly so as not to disturb Aunt May, but halfway through, he realized that Aunt May had been waiting for him, so he simply went into the house, closed the door, and went straight to the refrigerator to start looking for food. Aunt May was watching him from the side. Parker slapped his thigh while checking the refrigerator and said, "You don't have to wait for me to come back." "No, I want to wait," Aunt May said as she looked at him with her chin in her hand. "No, there's no need for that. There's no need for that. Where have you been?" Aunt May stood up and looked at Parker. "Okay, I'm out." Parker didn't dare to turn his head. He didn't want Aunt May to find the bruises on his face. "Did you buy eggs?" Parker paused when he heard this. "No, I forgot to buy eggs. I'll go buy them right away," Parker said, closing the refrigerator and going out to buy them. "No, you can't go out, especially so late." Aunt May closed the door that Parker had opened, and Parker immediately walked to the other side with his back to her. "Look at me, Peter. Take off your hood. Look at me." Aunt May knew that Parker was afraid to face himself and something must have happened, so she asked him to take off his hood. Parker saw that he couldn't hide it from Aunt May, so he could only take off his hood and turn around to look at her. Seeing Parker's appearance, Aunt May subconsciously covered her mouth and said with both heartache and sadness, "Peter, where have you been? Who beat you like this? Go to bed, Aunt May." Parker didn't want Aunt May to know that he was looking for the murderer of Uncle Ben. "Tell me." Aunt May looked at Parker with red eyes. She didn't want Parker to keep everything in his heart. "Aunt May, please go to bed. Please." Parker also begged Aunt May with red eyes and clasped his hands together. He really didn't want Aunt May to worry about him. Chapter 124. I can't sleep. Don't you understand? I can't sleep. Aunt May was a little angry that Parker had to hide everything from her. At this time, the water in the kettle boiled. Parker went over to turn it off. Aunt May pulled Parker's clothes and looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Peter, listen to me. Secrets have costs. There is a price. No matter when." Parker didn't dare to look Aunt May in the eye, walked around her, and went back to his room. Parker came to the door of the police station in George Stus's car. He had put on his homemade spider suit, which Aunt May helped him sew, and he learned from Cheyenne Mew to make a spider silk launcher. When Spider-Man got off the police car, the citizens who surrounded the police station saw him and shouted his name. "Spider-Man! Spider-Man! Spider-Man!" The shouts at the scene were deafening, but surprisingly uniform. They were all loyal fans of Spider-Man. "Hi." Parker greeted them and jumped directly to the door of the police station. At this time, several policemen were trying to maintain order. George squeezed in from the crowd with great effort and took a loudspeaker from his men. Just as he was about to say something, he was interrupted by Parker's fans. "Let Spider-Man speak." He had to pass the loudspeaker to Parker next to him, and Parker took the loudspeaker. "Hey. Hello everyone. I'm your friendly neighbor Spider-Man." Parker greeted everyone, and the fans at the scene cheered again. "Spider-Man, did they apologize to you?" Although they were happy that Parker came, some fans did not forget the original purpose of coming here. "Apologize. Apologize." The overwhelming shouting forced many policemen to bow their heads. As a policeman, it was also a shame for them to have their colleagues shoot at Spider-Man. "I think Chief Stussy will give me an explanation." "Don't worry. Don't gather here anymore. It will cause trouble to everyone." Parker stood at the door of the police station, holding a loudspeaker in his hand, with a helpless expression on his face. He looked at the group of fanatical Spider-Man fans in front of him, and his heart was full of helplessness. It was not a good thing for citizens to block the police station. "Listen to me, everyone. I know you all like me very much, but blocking the police station is not the solution to the problem." Parker's voice came through the loudspeaker, and he tried to make his voice sound more firm and convincing. After hearing Parker's words, the fans began to waver. Some of them began to whisper and discuss Parker's words. "Spider-Man is our hero. We can't let him get hurt. They must apologize." A fan shouted. "But we can't break the law and discipline either. We must support Spider-Man through legal means. Believe in the police. They will give everyone an explanation. Everyone leave first." Parker responded to them. After listening to Parker's words, the fans began to disperse gradually. Although they were a little reluctant, they still believed Spider-Man's words. Parker was relieved as he watched the fans leave. He knew that these fans were doing this out of their love for Spider-Man, but this also made him determined to protect the people. "Thank you, Peter Parker." "No, Spider-Man." A policeman came over and said to Parker, "You're welcome. This is what I should do," Parker said. George was also relieved to see that the situation had stabilized. Just now, he received a call from the mayor of New York. The news that the citizens surrounded the police station had been on major media networks and would be published in newspapers soon. He had to handle this matter properly, otherwise he might end up in trouble. Fortunately, Parker was still very prestigious and spent a lot of time persuading these fans to leave. The cross-species gene transplantation was finally successful. I used the DNA of the lizard to help Freddy grow his limbs again. In Connors' office, the three-legged white mouse Freddy already had all four limbs intact. "This is a miracle," Legitrator exclaimed. "No. This is hard work and commitment. This is one step closer to primates." Connors denied his statement, believing that this was the result of his own efforts. "He doesn't have time for you to complete every small step," Legitrator said. He knew that Norman Osborn would not be able to hold on for a few days. A small step. Connors was a little surprised that Legitrator dared to say that. I mean, he can't wait any longer. Legitrator also realized that he had said the wrong thing and made up for it. He has to wait. Unless he wants to be a guinea pig. Connors also knew that Norman couldn't wait, but he had to wait. That's not what I meant. What do you mean? Connors didn't know what he wanted to say. You must start human experiments. Start now. Legitrator's tone was firm. No. I absolutely don't agree. Connors certainly couldn't agree to such a thing. Now that research has just made a new breakthrough, how could human experiments be conducted casually? Then he will die. Legitrator's tone suddenly became a little dangerous. People are bound to die. Norman Osborn is no exception. Connors put away his folder and prepared to leave the office. We haven't finished yet. Legitrator stopped him. Human experiments? Where are you going to find volunteers? Connors questioned. It was impossible to conduct human experiments in a short period of time. It would take a long time to find volunteers. What volunteers? Just tell them that it's a winter flu vaccine. I think we can start at the Veterans Hospital. Legitrator looked at the lizard potion in his hand and said nonchalantly. Are you kidding me? Connors didn't expect him to be so bold that he actually wanted to experiment on veterans. I'm not kidding. Legitrator's expression was very serious. Wardfer? How dare he? George Stacy stood up in disbelief, and Parker was also very shocked to look at the inhuman Legitrator. They were still discussing how to prevent today's incident from happening again in the police station, but they didn't expect Cheyenne Mew to suddenly reveal a big melon to them. Parker glanced at George Stacy, and George nodded to him. Catch him. Peter. I'll apply for an arrest warrant immediately. Quick. Parker immediately took off his coat, revealing the spider suit underneath, and started walking towards Osborn Tower. At the same time, people all over the world began to accuse Legitrator of inhumane behavior, and the stock of Osborn Industries began to plummet. Some shareholders realized that something was wrong and sold their stocks, fearing that it would be too late to sell them. Legitrator slumped in his chair. Connors had just started to develop the lizard potion. He just thought that Norman Osborn was saved, and he could rise to prominence, but suddenly he fell into the abyss. Chapter 125. Escape. I want to escape from here. Leave America first. After sitting for a while, Legitrator realized that someone might be on the way here, so he immediately took the elevator downstairs and prepared to run away. He didn't dare to call the driver at the critical moment and drove away from Osborn building quickly. As soon as he left, Parker arrived with a spider silk. The second generation Norman Osborn was lying on the hospital bed and was almost pissed off by this scene, but he was already dying and he was directly in a critical state. Doctors and nurses received the emergency signal and rushed over to give him first aid. Where are they? Parker came to the front desk and saw the front desk lady who had accidentally let him get in, so he took off his mask and asked, "Oh, Spider-Man. Peter Parker." She couldn't help but exclaimed, and the employees who were still immersed in Legitrator's bold behavior in the sky turned their heads and looked over. Hi. Hello everyone. Tell me where he is? Parker first greeted everyone, then asked anxiously. Drive latter just went out in a hurry. Go to the left. His license plate number is. The beautiful receptionist finally came to her senses. She also saw Legitrator's behavior. Seeing him rush out, she silently wrote down his direction and license plate number. Thank you, and I'm sorry before. Parker said thank you and ran towards the door. When he was about to go out, he thought of something again, turned around and apologized to her, and then started chasing without looking back. Dingling. Parker took out his mobile phone from the bag behind him, and George Stacy's voice came from it. Peter, did you catch him? I have applied for an arrest warrant, and it will be issued soon. Because Legitrator's idea was too crazy, he actually set his sights on veterans. The New York military boss was furious and put pressure on the top leaders of New York City, so the arrest warrant reported by George was passed at a very fast speed. Or it can be said that the arrest warrant was issued before his application for the arrest warrant was submitted. Not yet. He drove away from the Osborn building, and I'm chasing him now. Parker replied after a moment of hesitation. Okay. We have also sent people to pursue him. George hung up the phone and got into a police car. Almost all the police forces in the police station were dispatched. Legitrators' escape only lasted for a while before it came to an abrupt end because he was stuck on a busy road. Parker moved quickly. Although there was a lot of traffic on the road, he still saw his car accurately. Legitrator was ready to abandon the car and escape, but as soon as he left the car door, Parker landed on his head. Hey, man. Where are you going? Parker half crouched on the roof of his car and teased him. Legitrator knew he couldn't run away. He didn't expect Peter Parker to catch up so quickly and find him so accurately. When George and his men arrived, Legitrator had been tied up with spider silk. Parker was sitting on the roof of his car eating pizza, which was specially given to him by a little girl. Parker said it tasted great. Thank you, Peter. George gestured, and a police officer took Legitrator into the police car. George breathed a sigh of relief and thanked Parker. After all, if he didn't catch the man, his hat would definitely be lost. You're welcome. Parker clapped his hands and jumped out of the car. Let's go. We haven't finished talking just now, and Gwen has woken up. Her mother just called me. She is fine, so you don't have to worry. George smiled at Parker. This was the first time he smiled at Parker. Even though he had relieved the police station before, his face was stinky. Okay. Hearing that Gwen was fine, Parker also laughed. Although he knew it was a gift from Cheyenne Moo, he was always worried that Gwen didn't wake up. Carnes thought he was crazy and wanted to leave directly, but Legitrator grabbed his broken arm and pushed him back. It's a bit late to feel shocked and angry now, Kurt. About 15 years too late. Legitrator looked at Carnes inexplicably. I don't know what you are talking about. Richard Parker dresses very well, and you can only wear cheap suits, like before. Legitrator's words made Carnes seem to have returned to the past. I have nothing to do with that. Is that how you told his son Peter? Legitrator asked. Hearing this, Carnes raised his head and looked at him. I don't know what you are talking about. You don't know? Or don't you know? Want to know? Then let me remind you what happened. Richard Parker said what you are saying now. Time is running out. Mr. Connors. I won't do that. Connors hesitated for a moment and thought of Parker. He had been deceiving himself all these years, but now he decided to face his heart, so he resolutely rejected Legitrator. Legitrator looked at Connors with some disappointment. He didn't expect that after so many years, he became more determined. Okay. Anyway, the formula is ours. Say goodbye to the arm you dreamed of. I'm going to close your laboratory. Your toys will also be cleared away, you know. Legitrator said and glanced at the little white mouse. Right, Freddy? Then he left the office, leaving Dr. Connors alone there. Connors was holding the lizard potion in his hand, which he had just made. He was about to tell Legitrator about the news, but he was dumbfounded by the madness in the sky. He also mentioned Richard Parker's matter. He didn't know how to explain it to Parker. Although he didn't participate, he did know something. Drive Connors, you are worthy of it. You actually withstood the pressure. Toby Spider was full of praise for the first generation Connors in class. The first generation Connors smiled and didn't say anything, but it was obvious that he was very pleased with Toby Spider's praise. At the same time, people all over the world also praised the behavior of the second generation Connors. For a time, he became famous. He was originally only famous in the academic world, but he became famous all over the world. Tony felt that Connors might not be involved in Richard's affairs, but he must know something, and Legitrator was very clear, and might even be one of the masterminds behind the scenes. Because he learned that his daughter had woken up, George really didn't want to discuss countermeasures with Parker. At the same time, because the mayor of New York planned to meet Parker in person, he simply took Parker home and took him to see the mayor tomorrow. Although Parker was worried, he still planned to go see Gwen first. As for Legitrator, there was plenty of time to ask him. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.